Hello, everybody, and welcome to what is sort of kind of a cool music room thing. My name's Patrick.
And I'm Chris.
Welcome to the music room.
Welcome back to the music room.
Just as I remember it.
Yes. Totally identical in every way to the way we always did it on...
Oh, never mind, you're back.
Totally identical to... Oh, I probably totally bashed my microphone signal into non-existence there.
Oh, I see.
Sorry. Sorry, guitar. It was $15 at Walmart, so...
Perfect.
The other thing I have to do at the beginning of every video, I have my ice here.
Your pink ice?
It's cherry Kool-Aid mixed with water.
Amazing.
And I have my last ever, until next year, last ever Liberty Mountain Dew.
What does Liberty Mountain do?
Last year, it's a special Mountain Dew that they release every year for, because they do like quarterly Mountain Dews now, in case you didn't know. But around 4th of July, they always do Liberty Dew. And last year, it was sort of a purple because it was a combination of the white Mountain Dew, the red Mountain Dew, and the blue Mountain Dew. And this year, it's a little different. It's sort of just kind of like a raspberry Mountain Dew. It's similar to Mountain Dew Voltage, which, as you should remember, is my favorite beverage on the entire planet. But this is actually a little bit better. And so that's the last one I had from the last case I could find in the world.
Wow.
And so...
Did you check Amazon?
Oh, no, I don't buy stuff on the internet. I'm too poor for that, Chris.
Oh, that's right. We talked about that.
I can only go to Walmart and buy Mountain Dew when it's on sale. 3 for $9, maybe 3 for $12. That makes it, $4 per case. But normally it's $4.99 per case, which is outrageous for a 12-pack of pop.
That's outrageously high?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so funny.
In my opinion. But hey, Nebraska, different cost of living. You live wherever. I'm sure it's like $12 for a case of pop.
I have no idea what it costs. I haven't drank pop in 15 years.
You're missing the good life. You're missing the good life.
I see you say that. And I would have agreed with you at one point, but I don't anymore.
You probably don't have to suck your stomach in for the whole 3.5 hours we're going to record this video.
I don't.
So.
No, I don't, actually. I lost 25 pounds since May.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
I haven't left the house since May, so...
Same, more or less. I did work for a little while up until June, but then I don't go anywhere.
Yeah, but I didn't go anywhere before coronavirus, so I guess.
Yeah, probably didn't even notice.
Anyway, so we are here to talk about our top 12 favorite albums of the year 2020, the wonderful cataclysmic year that was 2020.
Yep. Before it is erased from our memories.
Chris and I have It's actually kind of funny how little we've talked.
Yeah, we probably talked.
I don't think I've actually
10 times.
talked to you real time since 2019 for sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. We'll go back and forth every once in a while.
But every now and then, yeah, on Facebook Messenger or texting, we'll go back and forth. And usually it's because I say, hey, check out this band, or you do the same thing, like, hey, check out this band. Mm-hmm. And so we've gone over music a little bit with each other, but I told Chris before we started, like, I do not think we're going to have any albums that overlap. He thinks we might have one. Maybe we'll have a couple.
Do you want to guess what you think that overlap album might be?
I do think I know what that overlap album, what you think it is, but I don't have that album on my list. I don't even have it in my honorable mentions. Do you want me to tell you what I think it is, or do you want to just wait?
I think let's wait.
Okay. And I'll tell you if it comes up, and I'll be like,
I'm
that's
not
the album.
surprised. I won't be surprised if that's true. Maybe a little, but we'll see. Yeah, I'll be a little surprised. Continue.
But honestly, one of the reasons I've been looking forward to recording this video for since I've been wanting to do this for months,
yeah,
but I didn't get up the courage to ask you if you would do it with me until 2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, which is silly.
Well, but because I don't know. I mean, who knows? And who knows? Yeah. But I'm so glad you decided to do it, because I am just this year I have been so pumped about music. Just I feel like this is, to me, one of the best years I've ever experienced in music, which is interesting because I feel like the highest highs of all the music that I've experienced don't equal the highest highs of other past years. So if you took like my top 10 favorite songs off of all the albums we're going to talk about and put them against all my top 10 favorite songs of the albums from other years, I don't think it'd be even close. Like I feel like individual song basis and like my mind, when I say like high point of music, I always think when we were doing the music room and that Delirium song or Delirious song from Grace Potter, how at the end of it, she just has this like moment where you and I are both like, this is like the greatest moment of the year. I don't know.
Boy, I need to listen to that again because
yeah.
this is all.
Yeah, the song's about her
Wiped.
sleeping and writing songs at night, and then at the end of the song, like it just stops, and she starts to like build up, and she just goes, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" And just like starts freaking out, like screaming, and it's just this like 2-minute long thing, and then background vocals come in and go, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!"
Sounds like the kind of thing I'd like.
It's awesome, and like totally. Like the high, we both agree, like the high point of music that year is of all the stuff we'd heard. Wow. So, anyway,
I can't wait to experience that again for the first time.
I'm excited. Well, go back and listen to that Grace Potter her solo album.
Okay.
It's her first solo album because she released her second solo album last year or the year before. Time is non-existent this year, so who knows what's going on.
Yeah, it's still late March.
But anyway, my very long-winded point is that I'm really excited to talk about music because I got to experience music differently this year than I ever have. And it's for one reason and one reason only, and it's the fact that I have given in to the corporation. I have given in to the man. I am suckling the teat of digital music, Chris.
This is also known as simply progressing with technology.
I know, but Chris, it hurt me so bad.
I know it did, and it was so silly that it did.
I know, and anybody that knows us at all knows how much I've resisted this for years and years. And I still managed to get this stack of CDs here. And some of this is on my list and some of it's not. And I didn't even count it. I think it's like 12 albums, maybe closer to 15.
It's convenient number.
And there's, I think a majority of my albums are things that I listen to digital only. So the way that I've discovered new music totally changed this year, and it's all due to Spotify and Facebook, which I know are really different things that, whatever. But what I ended up doing was, kind of in the fall of last year, I started to kind of curate my Facebook feed, so that instead of getting ads for Budweiser or Victoria's Secret or whatever would happen to come up, I curated it to give me ads for new music that was coming out. And the way I did that was just simply by clicking on, if I'd see an ad that's like, hey, my new album's out today by whatever band or whatever dude, I click the link, click another link, and if I could get to listening to a sample of their music within like, let's say 10 seconds of me clicking the first time, then I would listen to it. And I would listen to like maybe 20 seconds. And if it sounded interesting to me, I just automatically saved it on Spotify. Like, boom, save it. Listen to it later when I want to listen to music more. Or if I was in a position where I could listen to music, if I was doing work or something on my computer, listen to it more at that point. And so basically I changed the way that I use Facebook. And now when I scroll through Facebook, like every 3 things I see is like a new band, new album, new
That's
EP,
awesome.
New song being released, whatever, no matter what day of the week it is.
Yeah, that's
and
pretty cool.
yeah, I love it. And so the reason I bring all this up is because Chris, I know you're not a big user of Spotify, so you might not even be aware of this. But at the end of every year, Spotify does this cool thing where they sort of calculate these all the things you've listened to. And
the Unwrapped thing. It's been huge on Twitter this year, watching a bunch of different people's Unwrapped lists. And it's like, as a YouTube Music user, it's like,
dang, I wish I could have that. Huh?
Yeah, I don't hate YouTube Music. I really do not. But I do wish I had that. That's a neat thing.
So what I want to do here is go through, and I think I wrote it down somewhere. Okay, so we're back. I found the document that I needed. So basically in getting my Wrapped, these are some of the numbers that I have from using Spotify throughout the year. So I told you how I'll scroll through Facebook, find an artist or something, and if the artwork or the name or whatever the post is catches my eye, because I scroll past so much that I just, doesn't look interesting to me, just basing the judging the book off by its cover. But if I look at it and it looks interesting, then I'll give it a listen. And if, like I said, if I can get to music within 10 seconds of clicking the link, then I'll listen to it. I did that 601 times this year.
Wow.
So
Man.
I listened to 601 new
That's
artists.
amazing. Because Facebook has no value outside of what you've just described at this point. It's just the trailer park of the internet now.
Right.
And that is a really great way to keep using it for value.
And so now I'm going to go through some more numbers from my Wrapped. So I listened to 601 new artists. I listened to 724 total, which tells me that I think that means that last year I discovered 121 or about 125. And then this year I did 601 new ones. And that was as of, I think, last week when they did the Wrapped thing. And since then I've already added like 5 new albums to my thing. And I'm sure I've listened to more that I decided not to keep.
That's nuts, man.
Now, some of that number could be I listened to it for 20 seconds, I think, and I didn't like it, and so I didn't save it. So that's not to say I have 601 albums or songs saved in my like Spotify playlist. That's just to say that I tried that 600 times. And I don't have the total list of albums that I listened to, but I would estimate that it's got to be close to 300 for sure.
You could probably make a YouTube channel that's just like the weekly Unwrap, and then it's just, here's all this new stuff I came up with this week, because I hear from people in my life all the time, I just don't know how to find new music. And it's like, well, if there's one guy on the internet that's going to consistently give you a list of new music he found, like if you're going to sit there and do that all day long, make a thing out of it. Make it into something that you do for other people. And
I'll have to think about that, because it is so great. I love it. I mean, I love it. And I've come across like the worst music I've ever heard in my life. I heard this year 100 times because came across stuff like that's just horrendously bad.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like a 5-year-old making it in his mom's kitchen while she's cooking
dinner. Well, that is
dinner.
the ultimate downside of accessibility, both in terms of getting it and also making it, is like, well, now you have to sort through 700 million people's worth of mediocre or total garbage.
And that's why, honestly, like I understand a lot more now why having like appealing artwork is so important nowadays. Because if you just scroll through and you see a cool album cover, it's like, oh, well, I'm way more likely to click on that than I am if I just come across like a really, terrible Photoshop thing or bad photo, So now of those 724 artists that I listened to, that's a total of 309 different genres of music. Now that stat is ridiculous because that's, I assume, when you upload music to Spotify, which is something I've never done.
You get to pick the genre.
You get to pick the genres. And
I was thinking that the other day because one of my number one album on this list is, oh boy, now I got to look it up. Talk Amongst Yourselves.
Well, so while you're looking that up, I'll say, along with those 309 genres, 177 of them were new genres that I had never listened to before.
Yeah, and what I was going to say, my number one album from this year, this genre is listed as Witch House Electronic.
Oh.
Yes. And I was like, oh, well, okay.
I've never heard of that.
Exactly. Me neither, but that's what it is.
That's interesting because obviously I've heard of house music. I've heard of electronic music.
Of course.
But I assume based on the music that you like, which I do not think that you enjoy house music, like the genre of house music.
I would probably say I do, depending on what it is.
Yeah, I know you like Infected Mushrooms, so I
like
know
I like a lot of EDM, and I wouldn't be surprised, but I would have to listen to a bunch of stuff classified as house, and then we could make that determination. Because otherwise, I've never specified the genre and said, music. Look for this house music.
To me, house music is a little bit boring. Like when people think of generic,
four on the
music,
floor, just like
that's like house music to me, but chiller than techno. But anyway, that's interesting, and I'm excited to get into, like, we can think about genres as we're going through this, but I don't know if we're going to be able to, like, I don't want to waste a bunch of time, trying to debate what genre each thing is. But
do you have any idea what you think my number one album might be, even based on that description of Witch House Electronic?
No.
Okay.
No.
I'm interested now when you find out, if you're like, oh, I see, like,
well,
because it is. I consider it a pretty apt description. I just never would have thought of it.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because. Well, I'll get into that in 1 second. I just want to finish my Wrapped thing real quick because there's one more stat that I find interesting, and that's that all total I listened to Spotify this year for 11,936 minutes, which equates to about 200 hours. It's 199 hours. Now, I will say that listening to, I would say I listen to Spotify, I would say maybe only like a quarter of the time compared to when I listen to CDs.
Oh.
Because I still listen to CDs like a vast majority of the time, because every night when I go to bed, I put a CD on, put my headphones on with my portable CD player, sit there and listen. And like any of these albums that I got throughout the year, like I listen to these way more than I listen to stuff on Spotify, with the exception of a few rare exceptions, and those rare exceptions are the ones that made it onto my list because I had to change my thought processing. I had to change the way I determined what was worth putting on my list, and it wasn't just obviously based off of what I listened to the most, even though that was partially a factor. But since when I sit down and I have literally all of music at my fingertips, what I choose has more meaning to it as on an individual basis in terms of what I chose because I had more options to choose from, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I would say I definitely listen to music at least like 3/4 more time on CD, just like listening to old stuff. Because I have, for those who don't know, I have like well over, I would say 1,500, probably close to 2,000 CDs. So, so that's kind of an interesting stat. So that's the last of my. Oh, one more thing I was going to say. It gave me my top genres that I did listen to, and this is really interesting, Chris. So my top number one genre that I listen to is electro pop. Number two is modern alternative rock,
Well, that's the one I would probably consider the oddest. That
which
doesn't
is so
sound right
weird
at all.
because I would never. I don't think, as far as I know, I never listened to any music that I consider to be modern alternative rock.
Right, like I hear that and I think like Dr. Dog or something that Graham would like,
But so who knows? But then we have alternative metal, which I think kind of makes sense because if you're a band and you're metal and you're not like straight up hardcore metal, like alternative metal could be any other kind of genre other than just straight metal, and probably even that too. Then we have synth wave, which
Big
doesn't
fan of
surprise me
synthwave.
at all.
Yep.
And then just electronica. But the interesting thing there is, of those 5 genres, 3 are electronic music and 2 are metal music, which I feel like kind of makes sense for me.
Yeah, I agree with that. And one of them doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and I think that it's just like if you could listen to something that's just like rock music, but like what kind of rock is it? It's just alternative. Like I feel like with modern vernacular, like alternative rock is basically just the same thing as saying rock music nowadays.
But like maybe there's an acoustic guitar in there.
Well, even like Imagine Dragons is probably modern alternative rock. Because like you could also say they're electronic because some of their songs don't have any guitars or real instruments in them at all.
Yeah.
You could also say they're a rock band because they play in stadiums, so it's like.
That's a good, I don't like Imagine Dragons at all, but you're totally right.
Okay, so so that's kind of sort of my journey, and so from there it was just kind of like interesting to like what music I gravitated towards, and then the way Spotify works, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, I just go click on my albums that I like, and then I just have like the picture of each album just listed there, and it's just scrolling down this giant long list of album. And so I would just, now the last few months I've been just going back through everything I listened to throughout the year, and if I look at something and I think I remember, like I think I like that, then I've been listening to it more to try to narrow down my list and things. And then there were about 4 or 5 albums throughout the whole year that I was just like kept coming back to them. I love this. I think this is going to make it on my list. And so because I listen to music that way so much, and because I still very highly value all my CDs, this year, I told you the other day, Chris, when we were just messaging on Facebook, this year has been the hardest year for me to make my top 12 albums. Like, it was so difficult. Normally, and I think it was the same for you, and we were doing the music room too, and we were doing our lists a little bit more kind of like together throughout the year. Like, the top like 4 spots are usually pretty, not necessarily easy to put in order, but you kind of have a sense of like, these are the best ones. And then everything after that, kind of just depending on the day, could just be kind of intermingled. And usually the last few years specifically, as I've been having like my financial, not having enough money to buy all the albums that I want, I've had less albums to choose from just because I listen to less variety of music, not using Spotify. Because of that, the last like 2 or 3 years, I've actually had trouble figuring out a full 12 albums to put on my list. And some of the things that would be at the end of the list I liked, but might have actually disappointed me a little bit. But this year, I didn't have any problem finding 12 things. I actually had 20 things that I was like debating really hard over. And I could have probably had like 40 albums that I've been listening to the last like several months, trying to like decide, like, is this good enough for me to even think about it? And then there were a few albums that I had in the back of my head where I was like, okay, I know I listened to this once and I really liked it, but I haven't listened to it since then. going back, trying to listen to it, having just environmental situations come up and like, dang it, I got interrupted halfway through listening to this. I'll start it again next time from the beginning or start it halfway through or whatever. And so I almost like, I was having anxiety this last like week and a half trying to figure out my list because I was so afraid that I was forgetting something that was really special and important to me that had just slipped my mind. And because I'd listened to such a variety of things throughout the year, had totally slipped out of the equation. So that's how I calculated my list, and we'll get into it. Do you have anything you want to say about just calculating your list or listening to music
sure.
in general?
Yeah, for sure. One of the things I thought of recently in terms of how I listen to music and how much it's changed based on streaming is like there are a mountain of albums, probably anything prior to 2010, that I know every single word to every song. I know everything that's going to happen. I know every song inside and out. And I find that that is so much less common for me than it used to be. And I mean, there is definitely a concept where it's like, well, this album has been around for 15 years. It's going to be that way based on time alone. But I also think that with the availability of the online music catalog, I'm moving from album to album so much quicker than I ever did before, where it's like an album is out, I've got it, I'm going to play it to death, which is, I mean, that's kind of, people talk about how they, went and saw the original Star Wars 25 times. And it's like, well, that's because once it would left the theater, you didn't have it ever again.
Right.
And you didn't have a world of other, nobody else had anything to do. And so it was a lot easier then. And so the paralysis of choice, I guess, has sort of crept into my life. And the system that I've kind of worked out for determining my top albums is that I will listen to something new, decide that I like it, and if I have time to listen to more of it, I will. And if I don't, what I'll probably end up doing is taking the whole album, and I have a playlist called Top 12 Contenders. And so I just add album to playlist, and then I get, go through, it's like, all right, I'll listen to this, and then decide if it stays on the list or if it gets removed. And then at the end of every year, when it's just the top 12, then I have a playlist called Rotation, and that's where everything gets dumped after it's been on the top 12 list. So it's like this, this curation thing. But I've also had this year was one of the hardest years for me too, for a completely opposite reason to yours. Because I've been doing so much work in sound design and stuff that I've been working on, combined with not leaving the house for the whole year, basically, my opportunities to just listen to music have vanished. I can't listen. I mean, I have listened to video game music outrageously the last 6 or 7 months because that's really easy and it helps with getting other things done. But I can't, I'm not going to throw on, an Amaranth album while I make sounds for something because
you
it's
couldn't.
impossible.
It'd be too complicated. Right.
Exactly. It's too hard to deal with.
And that was it's funny you say that because I'm actually, and don't give anything away right now, but I'm actually, part of me was wondering, like, is he going to have any video game soundtracks on his list? So we'll see.
We will see. No, I do not. But I was thinking...
Well, I know Final Fantasy came out this year, so I just...
It did, and I could put that on there because it's one of the most amazing gifts I've ever been given was the 8-disc special edition soundtrack for that game. But,
whoa, that's awesome. Holy cow.
Yes, because the normal special edition is only 7, but there's a super special edition that is 8 because there's a jukebox in the game that has like 25 different renditions of all these old tracks that are all in there, and it's so good. It's the only place to get those jukebox tracks. It's fantastic.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but I was like, I do have one album, because so what ended up happening was I got it down to 20 albums as like the entirety of music that I have listened to for the year in terms of new albums. So it wasn't even like I need to narrow it down. I have 20 that I demand be on this list. It was like I have to pick 12 out of these 20. So like the top 5 was pretty easy. Number 1 and 2 was about a minute and a half debate which one goes on top, and then everything under that is kind of like you get your top 5, and everything under that is like, all right, yeah, this I remember this being pretty good. Like it just wasn't. It is not my most thoroughly vetted year of album choices, but it's because like the last half of the year I've had, it's just vanished, and my ability, I've been busy with my ears have been very busy. But I also don't like. The way that you've been able to actually come across new music and gather it is really impressive, because that's one thing that I like. I don't even know where most of my new music came from, because I feel like I have no system for finding new music. And now, because I have originally been, I was always a Google Play Music person, and it has become YouTube Music. And one thing that YouTube Music has done very well is it comes up with these super mixes where it's like we build all these different mixes based on what you like, and they are really well made. And a lot of times you'll come across new stuff in there. It's like, I've never heard of this, and it's fantastic. But other than that, I'm still mostly relying on bands that I know exist and bands that other people tell me about. So
let me
it
ask
hasn't
you
been
this
a great
then.
year,
Did
but-
you find yourself throughout the year having moments where you were like looking forward to something before it was released? Or did you only ever find out about stuff like post-release?
Oh no, there's several albums, mostly the ones in the top 5, where I was just like, I can't wait to get my
Because you knew the band and you knew they were coming out with a new album.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. See, that's, it's so funny because throughout this whole year, I would look back at times and be like, how did I ever know that a band I liked was releasing an album? Because on Spotify, now since I use Spotify primarily to listen to stuff that I don't have physically, there's nothing on there, almost nothing, that like tells you what's coming up or anything. You can,
Actually, you know what it was? One of the biggest indicators for me in this was I've been listening to this band, and then it tells me in the new releases they have a new single that came out. It's like,
Right.
aha, that must mean a new album's on the way.
and that's so interesting. That's an interesting way because for me on Spotify, you can follow an artist so that if they release new stuff, you get like you get kind of notified. Although I don't have notifications on Spotify or anything.
I
like that.
deeply wish YouTube did that. I always wanted Google to do that, and they never did. And that's one reason why it was like, if I spent enough time with Spotify to know how to use it, I'd probably switch pretty quickly.
And so what I do is I click on it, and if I liked it, I would click on the artist first, and I would look at the artist page and see, do they have albums out? Like, how long have they been a band? Like, do they have multiple albums? Do they just have one song? Is this like the first thing they've ever released? And so for the most part, if I saw an artist and they didn't have a full album out, I chucked it. it. I was not interested in it at all. However, on a few cases, if the song was like so impressive to me and I was like, I'm so excited about this, what I did was I followed the artist and I liked the song. And so then now at the end of the year, what I did was I kind of went back through and I looked at all the artists that I liked because I don't follow artists unless it's this particular situation that I'm talking about. So I went through and looked at all the artists that I followed, and I clicked on them. And if they had an album out, I know that album was probably released this year because I wouldn't have done that otherwise because of my system, which I know probably only makes sense to me in my head.
Sure.
But anyway, one of the albums on my list is on there because I heard a song way back at the beginning of the year, and I loved it. And so I was like, okay, and so I saved it. I liked that song. And then like in October or something, I was going through my list, and I clicked on it, and I was like, oh, I wonder if this person has released an album yet. And I clicked on it and I was like, oh, son of a gun, they have an album out. And I listened to it and it just shocked me and blew me away, and that is ending on my list. And I would not have come back to that had I not saved it the way that I did and gone back through and looked through my list. I would have never come across it again because there's just too much new stuff floating past me every day. So
I will say, yeah, that's a good point too, because a lot of times I'll follow a band on Twitter. And then they'll be like, oh, I've got a new album. And it's like, hot damn, let me go listen to that. So that's another place where I would hear it too.
okay, so should we actually get into our lists here, Chris?
Yes, our
Or
30-minute prelude is ready.
Before we,
Done.
I sent you kind of a document to kind of fill out with a little bit of like some honorable mentions and different things. Should we do one of those categories now, then do some of our albums, and then do another one of those categories later? It's kind of what I was thinking we would do. So do you want to do, I think we should save our honorable mentions, like good stuff, till a little bit later, because some of my honorable mentions might kind of give away to you some of the stuff that's not going to be on my list. Like, spoiler, this album's not on the list. I think what I'm going to do, if it's all right with you, do you want to go through your like really disappointing albums that came out this year? Because I feel like that's a good way to get rid of them.
I only have one.
Okay. Well, let me do one first.
And I think it's probably one that's in your top 5, but go ahead.
Oh, that's really interesting. Oh, shoot. Do you want me to guess what it is? Because I'm going to tell you what. I have one.
I bet you know what it is.
Okay, I'm going to give you one. Oh boy. See, now my brain is turning. Because now I'm wondering if like, oh my gosh, if you really liked some of the albums that I didn't like, then that might be on your list. So now I'm thinking that one of the ones that's on my really disappointing list might be on your actual top 12 list.
I think it is. It might be.
Oh, that's funny. Okay. Well, then okay, well, whatever. We'll just... Okay.
Yeah, we got to move some which direction.
So for me, I will say the most disappointing the album for the year for me, by the widest margin that's possible, I think this may be the most disappointed I've ever been in an album, It's not the worst album I've ever heard. It is actual music put down with real instruments playing in the key and real singing. It just is terrible compared to what their two previous albums were. And I'm talking about the July Talk album that came out this year.
Oh, good. Didn't even know they had one. That blew
It
past
is
me.
atrocious. Their first
Dang.
two albums are this cool, gritty blues rock, kind
They've
of like
got some really
kind of
cool
like the
music.
Black Keys, but a little bit heavier. And the coolest thing about their band, if you remember, is that the guy has this raspy Tom Waits voice, and the girl has this sort of like little girl next door angelic voice, and the juxtaposition of them singing together creates this really cool feeling. Chris, this album that they released, it is like
Can't wait to hear it.
it's like a shoegaze album. Like the whole thing is drenched in reverb. There's not a single distorted electric. There's not a single distorted electric guitar. There's nothing. Are you having technical difficulties or?
No, I just thought I'm listening, but I just thought of something that I'm going to bring to this
Okay, I
conversation,
wanted to
so
make
please
sure you
continue.
didn't have a technical difficulty or something.
No, I'm good.
So this album, it's basically just electronic drums that are the most simple, basic sounding electronic drums with the woman singing over it, drenched in reverb. There's not a single heavy moment. Not that there needs to be that.
Sure.
But there's so much reverb. The songs are so boring. They do the thing where they're like gonna swear a little bit to just be like edgy, which you know is like one of my biggest turnoffs in music. I don't mind it when a band swears. However, if you're gonna do it with a reason. Don't just do it because it's shocking or because like you're lazy songwriter. This is lazy songwriting. The mixing is okay, but the songwriting is just it's the most boring thing I've ever heard. And now I will say fully, like, I know there are people who like the music that they're making on this. Like, it's a different genre of music than anything they've ever done. And so that for sure is like the reason I don't like it. So like, I know there are people who do like this. And I think if you like this style of music, like they'd made a good album. But because it was so not at all. And I never listen to previews of new music when bands release singles and stuff. I never do that ever. Even now, having just a click away, I never do that. Like, if I know Power Man 5000 is coming out with a new album, I do not listen to it until that album comes out and I listen to it. That's that's how I do it. Like, I never listen to samples or nothing. This almost made me cry, Chris. This is the only album that I've ever bought that I could not finish listening to. I could not finish listening to it. I clicked through every song to make sure the last song wasn't just the one song on the album that was really good. No. I couldn't. It's awful. It's atrocious. It's so bad. Okay, you do one that you didn't like.
So I'm a little disappointed to find out that this is actually an album from last year.
Oh, okay. Let's say it anyway. Who cares?
But it's Beautiful Oblivion by Issues.
Oh, okay.
And Issues is like kind of like a hard. I don't even know what to call it. It's like it's very metal, but it has a lot of R&B elements, and they kind of balance the two back and forth. It's really good stuff.
Okay.
This album is trash, sir.
Oh boy. We should have just done our top 12
I know.
worst albums.
I was just thinking how much
about.
more fun it'd be to sit here and hate shit all day. But this is the first time, only time in my life, I sold concert tickets for this tour.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh man.
I was like, their previous music is amazing. They're going to focus on this album because this is the tour for this album, and I will not listen to this mess. I will not pay money to listen to this filth. And it sucks because their best song to date is also on this album. And it's like, how could you get it so wrong?
So wrong, yeah.
But man, unbelievable. Unbelievably bad.
You know, I've heard of Issues as a band before, but I always get them mixed up with the band Currents, and I don't know why.
Oh, that's
I think
interesting.
They're different, totally. But
They are different, I think so,
There's a
yeah.
lot of sort of like modern, like metalcore bands. So like Issues, Currents, Colors, whatever. It's just like one word with a lot of S's in it, I feel. A lot of multiple
Just a plural
letters.
of something.
Yeah. So that's a bummer. So I've got two more albums that really.
But yeah, my disappointment, my one and only disappointment for 2020, Power Man.
Okay.
Power Man 5000.
Okay, that I will tell you right now. That is not on my list of top 12.
Oh, excellent. Okay.
It's not.
Interesting. I'm
It was-
surprised.
It is in my top 20 though, so will be in my honorable mentions later. But that I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah,
you
we
can
can
talk.
talk about it
We'll talk about it later. So I have two albums that were disappointing to me enough to bring it up in a disappointing category, even though I think both of these albums are actually pretty good. They're just disappointing based on my expectations and what the band has provided previously. So one of those is Nightwish. For me, this was the year of Nightwish. I have listened to Nightwish's music more this year than any other band by far. And a lot of that has to do with discovering the reaction videos on YouTube, which is my new favorite thing in the whole world to do. Watch people react to music that I grew up loving. It's like the most gratifying and satisfying thing I've ever done in my life. It's amazing. I couldn't tell you the number of Nightwish reaction videos to Ghost Love Score that I've watched. It would definitely be in the hundreds. Like hundreds of people. And every day new ones come out. Every single day. And I watch them every single day almost. It's insane. But anyway, Nightwish released their second album with their singer Floriansen this year, and it's their second album also having Troy Docknoy as an official member of the band. And Nightwish is one of my favorite bands. I think they're legit like one of the greatest bands of all time. I think some of their albums are legitimately the greatest albums of all time. Great metal, fantastic vocals, 75-piece orchestra, 125-piece choir. Like, get it all in there. It's amazing. It's technical. It's crazy. But their last two albums with Floor, who is actually like technically probably the best singer they've ever had in their band, and definitely the most well-adjusted like metal vocalist they've ever had. Like, she can do screaming vocals. She can be more gruff and less like super feminine, which is how the Nightwish's two previous singers were. Their first singer Tara was much more opera, and their second singer was a lot more pop. But neither of them got to a point where I would say they were ever like heavy vocalists. Well, their new vocalist can be heavy, and she just doesn't really ever do it. And the songwriting their last two albums just has not been up to par. I feel like they're trying to be a lot more like Celtic and folk influenced, and that is just not what I want from them. I want the bombastic, and I also want the ballads, but I want strings. I want every song to feel like it was a work to create, not just a bunch of people standing around the studio writing cool songs. A Nightwish album should be a 4-year process, which is what their schedule is, every 4 years. To me, a Nightwish album should be so complex, so complicated, it should sound like it took 4 years just barely for them to get everything put together and put it out as this masterwork.
That's how I feel about Icy Stars.
And this album was not like that. So I got to mention that. And then the other album, which now I'm really wondering if this album is on your top 12. Super disappointing because there's 13 tracks on this album. Of those 13 tracks, one song over half, 7 of the songs are mixed with the vocals. Stupid, panned wide. I'm talking about Blue October's album.
That's not on my list.
Okay, thank God, Chris, because I recorded a reaction to me doing this album, and if you want to see a person's soul die, you can go watch
I want
that.
to watch that, actually.
Because I listened to the first song, and I'm like, oh, this is an interesting choice with the vocals. They have them spread wide. There's no vocal in the middle. And I listened to the second
That's a
song.
weird choice.
And they listen to the second song, and it's the same frickin' thing. And I listen to the third song, and it's the same frickin' thing. And it makes me really...
The amount of setup that went into making sure that everybody could see that drawing. This all has to stay in. This is very excellent.
Anyway, I don't even care about that, even though that's this. Here, I'll show you what it is. Hold on.
I do want to see it up close.
I've spent like 10 years trying to not crease this at all, and now it just falls off the wall.
Put it in a frame, you clown. That's so good.
I know, I need to.
I like it a lot.
I don't know if you can see on the bottom there, it says 2002.
It does.
I made it in high school in art. Pointillism, baby.
Never heard of pointillism.
It's just a style of art where you only use points.
Super
Everything
cool.
is dots. So anyway, Blue October, horrific. There's 13 tracks on the album. 7 of them are panned. The vocals are panned wide. And I don't know
What
who
a
made
choice.
that decision. But
Especially
that person,
because their albums are engineered so pristinely all the time.
And did you listen to this album, Chris?
I haven't touched it.
It's other than this, it would be their best album.
That's
Maybe.
such a big
Foiled
thing
is so
to
good.
say.
But the thing is, like, Chris, the drums on almost every song, half the songs are mixed much more like round and clean, and the other half are mixed more heavy, which Blue October traditionally always has one super heavy song on each one of their albums.
True.
Well, this album has like 4 that I wouldn't necessarily say are heavy. They're not like metal ones or rock ones where Justin's screaming, but the drums are huge. you can hear the room. The drums sound like these big, slapping, slow, plodding drums. And Justin, everything about it is great. And his vocals just messed the whole thing up. And you know what they did? You can watch my video for more information on this. But basically what I think they did was Justin recorded 3 takes of his vocals. They put one in the middle, and they high passed it, or they low passed it at like 300 hertz. So it was just 300 hertz and below in the middle. And then they took the other 2 tracks and they panned them wide, and they high passed them at like 700 or something, like maybe 300. You know,
That's a really great sound design technique, but I don't know how you would use it for vocals.
For sure. Cool way to make it sound wide.
Yeah.
But what it does is it leaves this gap in the middle. And what's sitting in there then? It's all the stuff that should be there. Bass, the kick drum, the bass, sound effects, things that belong in the middle of a song. But what's missing? The vocal. And it totally ruins the whole album. There's 5 songs that are normal songs on that album, and they're great. Mm-hmm. They're great. I don't know if you'd like them as much.
But there are 7 songs that are just with this
7
weird
songs
painting?
that are mixed that way. And the thing is, there's background vocals, and some of the songs have like female vocals in there with them, like Imogen Heap did on Foiled. Mm-hmm. There's cool background vocals, very lush and stuff in the back. Those are in the middle. Those sound great. But then it gets to the chorus and everything's spread wide. It's terrible.
I'll have to listen to that.
It was
I'm very
so disappointing.
curious.
And it wouldn't have been as disappointing if the songwriting wasn't as good and the quality of the recording wasn't as
Sure,
good as
if
it
the
was.
whole thing was a throw.
Like if the whole thing was bad, like Any Man in America, I wouldn't be as mad. But it's frustrating because everything was there. All the elements were there to make like Blue October's second best album after Foiled. But instead, it's...
Yeah.
So those are my disappointing ones. All right, Chris, without further ado, let's
do
get
it.
into our list. You go first. You're number 12.
My number 12 is Manifest by Amaranth. Why do you do that?
Because I drank all my beverage before we got to the list.
I love that you keep showing it like, here's how far in I am.
Because look, it's gone. I just got
know.
a chunk of ice. Okay, Amaranth. I have not listened to this album.
Oh, I've only listened to it a little bit. I'll make that admission. This is a
haven't
later in
listened
the
to
year album.
That's all right, though.
But Amaranth is the kind of band that you're like, well, a new album, probably going to be pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're solid. I don't know. What do we do? Should we play it? Like,
No, we can't play anything. Because
we
we'll
could
get
play it
copyright
for
strikes.
ourselves.
Nah, I think let's just
Okay.
to me, the best way, it just
This
like...
was, I wasn't sure if this is what we were going to do with this.
Here's what I was envisioning. We just say it, what our album is, speak a little bit about what we like about it. Mm-hmm. If it's something I'm not familiar with, you can tell me a little bit about what the band is.
Sure.
And I'll do the same thing for you. And then we just leave it up to people to go look it up. Like we could put links and stuff in the video description if you want.
Yeah.
To
I
songs
did
or
add
something.
On my initial list that I wrote up, I have a song from every album that I think is like, this is the one I would have picked if we were going to play them. Mm-hmm. I don't for this one.
For the
one I
record,
didn't do.
For the record, I would love nothing more in the whole world than to sit here and listen to it. But you know that would take so much extra time.
Yeah.
And I would have
we'll
to cut it
already
out.
be here all day, so you're totally
Yeah, and
right.
I'd have to cut it out. So we'll just... I know it's a bummer, but we're doing the video so that more people can watch it on YouTube, which I thank anybody who's watching. But like, I think we'll just have to go through and talk about it. And then I will say in the description, I don't know what we'll put down there for sure, but for sure, I have a Spotify playlist that I have created with, I'm going to create a Spotify, well, I have a Spotify playlist with like the best music of the whole year that I just, one song from every album that I liked. So there's like
great.
just a ton. And so I'll put that in there. But what I'll do is I'll also make a playlist that is just the one song from number 12, one song from number 11, and so on and so forth down the list to number 1. So that anyone listening to this can just click on it and listen to my list in order, just one song from each of the albums.
Yeah.
And if you want to do whatever you can do similar to that with YouTube Music, and then we can post the link in the description, that'll be down
Yeah, I can
there.
do that.
Yeah.
I might just make a link to my my top 12 albums playlist that I make.
Yeah, that'd be great. Whatever you want to put, whatever you want to give me, I'll post in the description.
Okay.
So since I haven't listened to it at all, I will say Amaranth's last album disappointed me a little bit because at this point I feel like in their career they were getting a little samey. Like you and I've talked about Amaranth before, like they sound like pop metal. Like it's like
Yes.
manufactured from the ground up. Every song is meant to
Absolutely.
be liked.
You're totally right. And I think
Right.
I have only known Amaranth for this and most previous recent album before this one. And so
Is that Massive Addictive? Is that
the new one or the old one?
no, the old one? There's their second most recent album. Because that's the album of theirs that I love. And I think after that they had one come out.
Helix. Actually, Massive Addictive was 2014.
Oh,
And so
okay.
after that was Maximalism was 2016. Helix was 2018, and then this one was Manifest.
Okay, so that's what it was. I loved Massive Addictive, and then I liked the one after that. I can't remember the word you said because it wasn't a real word.
Maximalism, yeah.
Maximalism. I have that one, and I remember that one being just like, I don't know. And then I haven't listened to the last two.
I liked Helix a lot, and this one just sounded like more Helix. Which, I mean, if your complaint is that they're samey, I would say, yeah, go ahead. But
Well, I know they got a new vocalist too. Like their clean singer guy was not the same clean singer guy that was on Massive Addictive, and I have their two albums from before that on
okay.
CD form. So
Well, that and he might be new as far as Helix goes because that sounds like he's in both of these.
So
So,
it's
yeah.
interesting. So your Amaranth is not my Amaranth.
Correct. Absolutely. Yes.
So that's cool. All right, we'll get to my number 12 then. Unless there's anything else you want to say about him.
Honestly, being number 12 and being as little as I listen to them and knowing as little as I do about Amaranth, I don't know what else I have to say. If you like
Sure.
the last album, you probably like this one too.
Do they have a lot of songs that like sound like they could be in video game commercials?
That's probably. I'm not sure. I never
that's
really
what
thought of
Amaranth
that
was
about
to
them.
me before. Like they
Yeah.
literally had songs that was like, okay, we're gonna make this song so that it can be like the theme for a League of Legends tournament.
The pop metal thing is so true. Like it is very manufactured. It's
Yeah.
very upbeat and happy in its way of, but it's like it's a lot of fun. It's just a lot of fun.
And this is this is great because one of my top 5 favorite albums is a album in this exact genre of like totally manufactured pop metal. Like this, like if you
It's
like
also 12
Amaranth,
songs, which is nice.
well, and that's something else we're gonna have to get into too because this is the year of 9-song album. Just terrible.
This year and last year too, both of us just like
Yeah,
you got to do
ridiculous.
10 or you sit in that studio until you get to 10. I don't
Yeah,
know
it's
what
like
to say.
seriously, just get an acoustic guitar and write a ballad or something and record it with one microphone for God's sake. Anything.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so that's interesting. I actually have written down on mine, I think, how many tracks are on each of my albums.
Oh, nice.
So-
Okay.
So that is something I'm going to make sure I mention that. So now we're on to my number 12.
Great.
And this was the spot that I had the most trouble with. And when we do our honorable mentions later, I'm going to tell you the albums that almost made it into this spot. But there was one album that I wanted in this spot so bad because I wanted to talk about that album here. And I'll probably talk about it later anyway, so who cares? But like I wanted it here because I thought it deserved it. And I couldn't deny this album. My number 12, that's my real number 12 for this year, I couldn't deny it. And so this album is the album Wonder Bloom by Becca Stevens.
Never.
And now we're going to run into something interesting, Chris, because you know that I like music in such a way that when I find a band that I like and I find an album that I like, I go out and I find out every single thing I can. I know the names of the dogs that the people in the band know.
That's true.
Own. You know what I mean? Like I know everything about it. Because of the way I found music this year, because of the way I consume music this year,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I know almost nothing about who Becca Stevens is. I know almost nothing. I did a little bit of looking the other day, and I did find out that she's considered a jazz artist, which you could have fooled me because this is not a jazz album at all.
Yeah.
And I found out that she's known for her guitar playing. And when I found that out, I liked this album even more because what this album is, it's 14 tracks. Every track is a full song. It's 53
Nice.
minutes long, so it's a
Nice.
full album.
That's a good, solid album.
This album is the reason I wasn't just right away immediately like this is going on my list is because her voice is just a tiny bit annoying, just like a tiny bit annoying. This is a pop female album vocal or female album, female vocal album. It has a lot of trip hop elements to it.
Oh.
As I said, the guitar playing on this album is phenomenal. Now, when I say guitar playing, I'm talking about like background guitar playing. The focus of every song is the drums, like the drum beat, and her vocal. And her vocal is right in the middle, and she sings with a very breathy voice. She has a very sort of like almost Imogen Heap type of voice. Like,
Oh, sure.
It's very breathy the whole time. She at no point is she ever like belting at all. It's just very close the whole time. But she does do a lot of background vocals that are varying styles. So that kind of all the choruses feel much bigger, which you know how structurally that is something that's always important to me.
How would you compare that vocal to a Fine Frenzy?
I think she intentionally sings quietly and breathy, but she could do a regular pop song.
I see.
Like she could sing like Britney Spears if she wanted to, or Christina Aguilera. She could belt. This lady, I think, could, but she never really does on the album.
I see.
There's 3 songs on the album that are way different than the other ones, and those almost sound like, and I'm going to say this, and I know what I'm saying, they sound like Michael Jackson songs.
Sure. Kimber sounds like Michael Jackson a lot.
Right, but this is not like that. This is not like Kimbra. And it's hard to see it and go, again, this, if we could just listen to like 10 seconds of a song, you'd be like, oh, this is exactly what you... But we
That's
can't
how
do
I
that.
sound too.
But we can't do that because of copyright and stuff. But
Yeah.
the reason this album's on my list is because of the arrangements of the song. The instrumentation is fantastic. I actually think that an instrumental version of this album would be just almost as good as the whole album, because the vocal melodies are all really catchy and really good. You can sing along with it. Every song has like a good chorus that you can remember the next time you listen to it. But what makes it special is like the variety from song to song. Every song has like a somber feel to it. If they're not all sad and they're not all minor, but none of the songs are like, you would not find any of this on the radio, I don't think. You could, and that's because stuff that's on the radio nowadays is a lot different than it was just even back when we were making the music room for those 2 years, 5 years ago. Like, I love where pop music is right now and just music in general in the world. I feel like the type of music that's popular right now, stuff like, you know, we love Lights, but then you think about stuff like Halsey, stuff like Sia, stuff like just the huge popular acts. Like Katy Perry even could do like a dark song about going into the cemetery or whatever, you know, like I love that kind of stuff. That's what this is, with the added instrumentation of like fantastic guitar playing. Like some of the songs have like this really cool plucking guitar behind them, and there's like flangers and stuff on the guitar, so it's not, none of it sounds like just a guitar and a lady singing. It's all very produced. The drums are all huge and enormous and sometimes really spread apart like a cool trip hop song should be. All of it, I believe all of it sounds like it was sort of like acoustically recorded, but there's a lot of electronic elements too. Some of the songs have male vocals, because I love it when a male fronted band has female backing vocals. I think that's really cool. And the same goes for a female fronted band with male backing vocals. It adds a lot to the song, and it can add a lot to the message of the song too. The lyrics of the song, which, you know, I don't pay attention to lyrics, but the lyrics on this album are really good. Everything about it, it's just such a long album. Like, it's not long lengthwise, it's only 53 minutes, but like every song is so thick and full in itself.
I mean, 53 minutes is a pretty long
Yeah,
album. Like
it is.
My next one on my list is 13 songs, and it's 38 minutes.
Right,
So,
and a lot of that, I think most of my other albums are like that too. But every song is so thick and full and meaty in itself. And then you listen to the next song, and it's got so many elements to it, and the songs are they all take their time. None of them feel rushed at all, which is something that I hate nowadays when a song is just rushed. You know, get to the good part and stay there. I hate that. And then all the songs have choruses that repeat. You know, none of the structuring makes me mad. None of the songs fade out. It's such a good album. It really is. Like, and obviously all of our top 12 albums, all 24 albums or however many we talk about here, are good albums.
right.
But this I couldn't not put it on my list because it's so impressive musically.
I'm interested in it. I've
So-
written it down to look at later. It's Wonder Bloom by Becca Stevens.
Yep. And Becca Stevens is Becca,
Yep.
and Stevens
Sweet.
Evens.
Perfect. I got it right.
So that's my number 12.
Number 11. To Better Days by Slaves,
Okay.
which
Don't
is
know who that is.
That is a new band, not in general, but to me, I've never listened to
Okay.
anything by Slaves before. They were recommended to me by a friend of mine. Johnny Craig used to be their original vocalist, who I think you might recognize. He's really big in the emo scene. I don't know. He might not be something that you are interested in at all, but
Was he the singer of a different band at some point, or?
he's all over the place. I'm sort of like half reading this as I say it. So
Okay, that's fine.
So no questions, damn it, no questions. But
Okay. Just know it's good.
yeah, it's really good. It's one of those albums that on the surface seems just like your pretty typical emo stuff, but if you really sit and listen to it, there's actually quite a bit of production depth where there's a lot of things happening in it that takes a certain level of attention to be paid to really get the best out of what's going on. But yeah, this is the first album with a new vocalist apparently. So I'm but which is news to me because this is the first album I've heard with him. But yeah, it's really great. That's all I have.
How many songs are on it?
Oh, it's 13. Yeah, 13 songs. It's 38 minutes. So there's 2 songs that are both a minute and some change. So it's
Little interlude things.
Yeah, and one song that's under 3 minutes. But it's still, even with that being true, it's still over 10, which is awesome.
So is it just like heavy chuggy riffs and then a guy screaming and singing in the choruses, or
there's much more. Boy, this being number 11, I just listened to this earlier today too, but
that's all right.
It's very ethereal. In a way, like it isn't super screamy. It definitely has an emo style in the vocaling. It's one of the higher register vocals, even I would say, even for most of the emo bands that I like. But it's very ethereal. It has a lot of just a lot of that to it, I guess.
That's cool.
I'll have a lot more to say once we get to the top 5, but
that's fine. Yeah. And I don't want to spend 40 minutes talking about each thing either, so I'm just going to go through some of mine.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to know what to do when we don't get a chance to sit and listen to it. So this is kind of news for us. This is kind of a new thing for us.
Right. And like I said, I wish we could listen to them, and maybe after we're done recording, you and I can just sit here and go through some of the stuff. I'd love that.
Yeah.
But for the recording, for everybody else, you'll just have to go look stuff up. We'll give you work to do. So now we're on to my number 11. And this is a band I don't need to talk about very much because you and I are both very familiar with this band.
Holy sh! This is all out of order. That's not my number 11. Yes, it is. Damn it. Hold on. I have 2 different lists, and one of them, and they don't match each other, and I don't know why.
Okay,
so hold on.
Figure out what the difference is. Here, while you do that, I'm going to go get something more to drink, okay?
Yeah, go ahead. Which one's the newest one? No, I like this better. Do I? Yep, okay.
Did you figure something out?
I updated my list so that I'm going to go ahead and be all right with 12 and 11, and then now it looks like they match, so everything's great. So let's just plow ahead.
Okay. I went and got... Now we have a sugar-filled glass of cherry Kool-Aid.
Oh, man. I love me some
Straight
cherry Kool-Aid.
Okay, so my number 11 is a band, like I said, we're both very familiar with, and this is one that I heard. I have the CD. I have it right. I'll show you what it is. I have it right here.
Ah, yes, The Used.
The Used, their album Heartwork.
Yes,
Now,
I remember you telling me about this early on.
This is a band that, they have an album that's called Lies. It's Lies for the Liars or something like that. It's their Pink album that has The Bird and the Worm on it. And it also has...
Yeah, Lies for the Liars, that's right.
Lies for the Liars. It also has Pretty Handsome Awkward, which was like one of their big songs on there. And that's the album, if you remember, Chris, where they have the production on it is so good. Crystal clear production, great vocal recording the whole time. And then they have a few songs that are sort of based off of like different little samples and percussive things. Well, since then, I think they've released like 5 albums since that album came out. Maybe it's just 4. And all of them have been not that. They've been much more raw, a band performing without trying to make it sort of like artistic, I guess, which is maybe not the best way to say it. But anyway, I haven't enjoyed the last few Used albums at all. This album is the sequel to that album. It is not afraid to be totally poppy. There's like 2 songs on this album that have no guitars, nothing, just electronic elements in them. It's just straight up like 4-to-the-floor dance song with Burt McCracken, if you recall, is the singer's name. Burt McCracken just...
I can't believe that's his name. I totally forgot about that.
I know. But Burt McCracken just like doing his thing, singing the song, and having a great time. Every single song on this album has like a character to it. and it's not necessarily like a sound character. It's although almost all of them are they all uniquely sound like their own individual songs. They all have this like little element to them that gives it this special little thing that makes them all different from one another, and like the whole album is just fun. Like it just really is. Like one of my favorite songs, they're going through and they're playing, it's kind of heavy, and they get to the chorus, and the chorus is just him going, "Ignorance is this." And then there's just this beat behind it. It's just ignorance is this. Rather than ignorance is bliss, it's ignorance is this. And then the rest of the song is about that. But and then these drums come in, it's just and it, like that, the whole point of the song is to get to this moment with the drums, and it's these big distorted drums, and the guitar is just going. So like you're just paying attention. You're just there for the drums, and you
Kinda
like
like in
the
the
whole
air tonight.
time. Yes, exactly. Except this happens every chorus rather than just at the end. But like they're kind of playing and they're getting to it, and then the whole song stops and he just goes, "Ignorance is this," and then the drums just kick in. It's just this plodding monster walking through to just pick you up and eat you, and it's great. And then the next song is just an acoustic ballad song where he has a great vocal melody. It's recorded really well. It's just totally put together great. There's 16 tracks on this album. And of all those 16, there's 2 intermissions. There's 14 full-length songs on this album. Everyone feels unique and individual. Everyone is catchy. Everyone is great. And so that's
Great.
That's
What
the
a great
heart work by the Used. Totally recommend it to
don't
anybody that has ever liked them ever.
I think I listened to that album when you told me about it initially, but I totally forgot about it. I haven't listened to it since then, and I should probably listen to it again. So I'll add that to my list as well.
All right, you're number 10.
My number 10 is The Things We Do for Love by The Sounds.
Oh, we do have one that's on our list together.
Hooray!
I totally did not think that we were going to. Okay, this is great. So we can both talk about this album then.
Yes. And I'll definitely lean against you for more of the finer details, but I didn't. Their previous album, The Weekend or whatever it was, was. It had a couple of hits.
It was much more progressive rock.
Yeah, it really strayed from how electronic all the stuff before that was. And this, I think, definitely went back into their electronic sound that I love so much from. What the hell was that album?
The
before
Weekend.
That? The one before The Weekend.
It was oh gosh, you're a terrible person for asking me that. Don't look it up because I'm gonna think of it. It was. They have 2 songs with string samples. The things we do, things we do for her.
That's the new one.
Nope. Oh, is it?
That's the new. Yeah, the new album, Things We Do for Love.
No, but I'm just saying words. It's more the melody.
Okay.
No.
I'm just saying words. Something to Die For.
Yeah, oh, damn it. That was one of my 2 favorite songs off that album.
That song on that album
Yes.
slaps, dude.
Yes.
It is so good.
So good.
But yeah, this reminded me of that, and I skipped over The Weekend in terms of my favorite albums by The Sounds. Because Dying to Say This to You is also probably my 3rd favorite album from them.
Did you
I
ever
don't
go
care
back?
for Crossing the Rubicon very much.
See, that's my favorite. Crossing the
Interesting.
Rubicon's my favorite.
It's better than I remember. Like, I listened to it again recently, and it was like, I don't know why I didn't like this as much as I do. But
See, I can't stand their second album, which is the one that got you into them.
Interesting.
The one with that picture of the 2
paint by
ladies
numbers
on
and
front.
stuff? Yeah.
Yeah. That album I don't like. But this album, yes. This was one that you and I we were looking forward to it before it came out.
That's one of them, yep.
And this one, when it did come out, I remember the pandemic was like in full swing because right after this, to promote the show, to promote the album, they did this cool live show where they live streamed for free an entire set that they had prepared to do their whole big tour. Mm-hmm. And it was great. And watching and then after that, they sat on the stage and people live chatted with them and asked them questions.
Super cool.
And so you can go still now on YouTube and watch this whole video of them performing. This album, I have it actually. I won't tell you where it is on my list until we get there, and I'll just mention that that's where it is. Mm-hmm. But this album, when I first listened to it, I was a little disappointed because every song is just 4 to the floor.
Sure.
Like every single song, with the exception of two, and they're both in the back half of the album. But the more I listened to it, the more I was like, man, because I've told you before, the lady who sings in the sounds, I think her name is Maria, or Marja. I think she has like a J in there. They're from Sweden.
Yeah, they are.
But she has my favorite voice of any singer ever.
Wow.
And I've
What a
talked to you
claim.
about that before. Yeah, she has definitely my favorite female voice. I just love the way she sings. And then the last 2 years, her and her husband, who is the guy that plays the keyboards and stuff for this band, they had their band, The Crew of Me and You, that neither of us really enjoyed their music of. I don't know if you remember it or not. But
I don't remember that.
yeah, it was a lot more like chaotic and also like weirdly like inappropriate. It was weird.
Okay.
But anyway, there were elements of that I really liked, and this coming back and doing a new Sounds album, which is something we haven't gotten for I think like 7 years. I think since The Weeknd came out. I think it came out 2013, right?
Hold please.
If you got it pulled up.
Yes, that's correct. Because they had an EP in 2017, but you're right. Other than that,
Right,
and
so
that
this
must
is
have been because they flitted off for that solo
right, which is something that they
project.
did just because they were disappointed or they were frustrated with the band not being able to do new music for whatever reason it was.
Sure.
I don't remember if don't know if they had other bands they were working on or something.
Seems hard.
But yeah, for sure. But I was so excited when we got this, and listening to it, it's just like one song after another after another. It's just, they're all good songs.
I can't believe it's been 7 years. Continue.
And then you get to the last like 3 tracks of this album, which are fantastic. The last 2 songs in particular, one of them is I can't remember which one, if it's the last one or the penultimate one, is like 5.5 minutes long, 5 minutes 15 seconds long, and
Last
it
song,
is
6:14. Yeah.
and it is just amazing. It's like because the thing that The Weeknd initially, I was really disappointed with that album, and then like years later, so like a couple years ago, I listened to it again, and I was like, wow, I was wrong about this album. Like, I was expecting it to be more of Something to Die For.
Yeah, and that is a huge. I think might have been a huge part of why I was so disappointed, because Something to Die For was a bang.
But I think they were going for much more of like a Pink Floyd feeling album, and I've referenced them before as a big influence in stuff that I've read of theirs. But like that album has much more of a band feel. Like the drums sound real.
It's
There's
a lot more
acoustic
real
guitars.
instruments for
yeah,
sure.
It sounds more like a band being a band, and for me, that kind of turned me off at first, but then when I went back and listened to it again later, I was able to appreciate the much more technical, sort of like the songwriting aspect of it. And they brought that over onto this album on certain songs. There are other songs that are like great, that like Bonnie and Clyde, I think is my favorite song on this album, has such a great chorus. The background, also, I have to say, because I was following them the whole time, not the whole time, but I was following them while they were making this album. They made this album themselves. Like, there was no other there might have been a producer, but like, this is their record label, them recording this album themselves before the pandemic and everything, writing everything themselves. And that's not the case for all their other albums. Some of their other albums, they had people come in and like help produce the album, write the songs with them and all these things. This is totally just them. And it is them doing what they do best. And I was afraid we were never going to get an album like this from them before. I thought that they had grown up to the point where they had moved beyond making pop songs, you know?
Sure.
But they didn't. And the guitar is great. The drums are great. I think the mastering could be just a smidge better, because there's some songs that are a little bit quieter than other songs. But that just comes with the territory of doing everything yourself.
Yeah.
And I would rather have it done like this than have it be overproduced and overthought. But yes, it is a very special album, and all the vocal melodies to me are what make it special, along with the back half of the album I think is stronger than the first half.
And that's rare on its own. Like,
For
what's
sure.
the last time that's true? The Purity Ring album from 2015 has like the last, I mean, that whole album top to bottom is perfect. That's a perfect album. But the last 2 songs especially, it's like, when do you ever hear songs this good on the back of an album?
Yeah. And I feel like I came across that a couple times throughout the year, and those are some pretty special albums. We might get to that later. But yeah, I am shocked that we had an album that was the same. I did not think that you were going to like this album as much.
I do.
I really didn't.
I
So I'm
love my
glad.
favorite thing when the sounds are banging on all cylinders. It's when they are their catchiest, and I love how catchy they can be.
Because you and I always used to talk about bands that were like either a an electronic rock band that's mostly electronic with rock elements,
Like Interparty System.
or Boom Boom Satellites,
Yes.
or certain bands that we talked about, Apoptygma Berserk, stuff like that. And the Sounds is one of those bands that can either do that or they can be a rock band with electronic elements. And this is them doing an electronic band with rock elements at its finest. Every song still has guitar that sounds like someone playing the guitar, not just effecty guitar stuff.
Yeah.
So you can still tell it's people playing the songs, but it could have all been programmed. The rest of the song could have all been like programmed on a computer with some live instruments over the top of it. And I love that kind of stuff. And not a lot of bands do that formula as good as the Sounds do it.
Correct.
For me, the Sounds and Shiny Toy Guns were like two bands that I always like. Every few months, I go online and I'm like, please let me hear some rumblings about a new Shiny Toy Guns album.
That's how I feel about the Cardigans, and that ship has mostly sailed, I think, for them, which is a shame. But I always them and People in Planes. I think, please, somebody.
Yep, for sure.
I have a story to tell you about People in Planes. Did I tell you that I know a guy who lives in Wales, and I was like, hey, tell me, like, here's this band I really like. Can you find out what happened to them? And he's like, I'm on the case, and I was like, okay. And then he's like, so I talked to these people, and they know this person, and I know this chick that knows Gareth, and they moved to, I don't know, some other part of London. And he's like, I kind of know where they're at, but everybody else is like, yeah, they vanished. All those dudes just like vanished, and it was like, oh, we're so close. I was gonna flip out. I was so excited to tell you that. I was like, dude, I know a guy in Wales, and
that's awesome.
We found People in Planes, and they've been kidnapped.
That's so funny. One of my other friends, my friend Jason, did the same thing. He's the one that tours with Jimmy Buffett, goes around the world, but he also tours with this Icelandic band. And so I told him that Korashi was one of my favorite bands of all time. And so he, like, without telling me, he was like, hey, I got this buddy that lives in the middle of the United States and he loves Korashi. And they're like, oh, dude, we're good friends with those guys. And I was like, dude, you got to give me like all their early material that you can't buy anywhere. And he was like, nah, I can't do that. I had a connection for a second. Speaking of People in Planes, I'll just talk about this for just 1 second, because there was one album that's not making it on my honorable mentions or anything like that, because I'm not familiar enough with it to even speak on it. But I believe the band was called The New Shining. Let me look it up real quick. Yes, the band is called New Shining, and their album is called Elephant. And it's hilarious because as I look, it came out in October of last year. So thank goodness I didn't make a fool of myself. And included on my list because it was close. Yeah. This band, Chris, sounds like the Sounds mixed with People in Planes.
What?
And I think...
What a combo.
I think because they use really, really amazing sounding synths. Just like really cool sounding synths. But the rest of everything else that you're hearing is a band that's playing unique and individual different sounding things like People in Planes. And then the vocalist doesn't sound that much like him, but there are moments where I was like, wow, this sounds just like People in Planes. You know how the coolest thing about People in Planes is that you really don't know what to expect from song to song. They didn't do anything. But every song feels like really good. That's what this band feels like, with the added element of like having like 80s synths and stuff in there.
Amazing. I'll listen to that. They've
Please
also
check
it
them
looks
out.
like they've got a new song for this year, a new single too. So I'll keep my eye on that. But I'll listen to that when we're done here.
For sure. Okay, you did your number 10?
I did.
Okay, now we're going to go to my 10, which is the band I know the least about on my whole thing. I know almost nothing about this other than to tell you to listen to it. I didn't want to put this album on my list because I don't know anything about it and because it's not the kind of music that I normally listen to. But at the end of the day, it ends up on my number 10. So this band is called Native Harrow, or Harrow. I don't know how to pronounce it. Native Harrow. It's Harrow. And the album is called Closeness. And I wrote this down to tell you what it sounds like. If you took the Pierces and you mixed it with Fleetwood Mac and a dash of the Mamas and the Papas, that's what this sounds like.
Okay.
The album sounds straight up like it was recorded in the same studio Fleetwood Mac recorded everything they recorded in. And it just sounds phenomenal quality-wise. Like everything, you hear the room breathe. It's kind of like that A Fine Frenzy album. Like you hear the space. And every time someone's playing something, it's very minimalistic in terms of like there's drums and there's bass the whole time in every song. And then what's around that that varies from song to song. There could be a little bit of guitar over here, a little bit of guitar over here, piano maybe, spread out, wide stereo piano. And the vocals are just like if Alison Pierce from the Pierces sang the whole album. She's the
Okay.
one with the slightly the deeper voice in the
Yeah, and I
Pierces.
mean the Pierces and the Mamas and the Papas are already
Very
so
similar. Yes. But there's the elements of the Mamas and Papas that are in here are that it sounds like an album from the late 60s, early 70s. Like this sounds like an album that Dan Auerbach would sit around and listen to like while he's just chilling.
That's
like
interesting.
it and the cool thing is this is an instance where I believe it's a woman who sings and plays maybe guitar. And then the man, her husband, I think. This is me just assuming from looking at a picture. I assume it's her husband or her musical partner does the rest of everything in the band. And his work is masterful. Like he is so good at playing very simple sounding things on like an acoustic guitar or something that just have a lot of impact in the song, but it's not showy ever. A couple of their songs sound like Beatles songs. There's one song that has like a cool flute part in it, and the flute is like the lead instrument the whole time. It's very cool. This is one of the few albums on my list that I would say any human being on the planet could listen to this and enjoy it, and that's all I've got to say about it.
Great. I want to write it down. What was it?
Native Harrow.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Harrow. And this is something to listen to when you're in a chill mood. And only then.
Okay. Excellent. That is very similar, and only by which I mean an album by a band I don't know, that I listen to only a little bit with very little to say about them, to my number 9, which is a band called Noija, I think, Noija, Noija. And they have an album called Through Fire, All Things Are Renewed.
Okay.
And
Wait, that's got to be a metal band, right?
it's not.
Through Fire, All Things Are Renewed is not a metal album?
I know it's emo, but in a more subdued kind of, I don't know, almost to the point where it would be more of like an emo metal kind of hybrid. But it's
Like the
very,
Deftones?
yeah, I could say that. That's a really good way of putting it, actually.
Well, when you say mellow, heavy music, like that's what I think of.
Yeah, and that's a really good way to put it. I wouldn't have considered that comparison. I think if even just because I haven't listened to this album quite enough for that yet. But it really caught my interest mostly by being somebody I'd never heard of. And actually, like, it's so often, I don't know, in my world, especially within certain genres, where you hear a band where it's like, I know this genre inside and out. And if I haven't heard of a band, they probably suck.
Right,
But
I
then you
think the same thing.
Yeah, but then you hear of a band and you're like, this is so good. How come I don't know who this is? Why have I never heard of this? There's another band-
100%.
Yes, there's another band in this category called Time the Valuator that is like, what a ridiculous name for a band. Excellent music. Never heard of them before. And that was like a year or two ago when I caught a hold of that. But like, this is exactly the same thing where it's like, Noija? Who? This is great. And that's all I have for that.
That's cool. Do you think it's something I would like or not?
Give it a shot.
Okay. We'll do that. I'm not writing anything down now, but I'll go through and make a list when we're done.
Yeah.
And I'll be able to click on your thing and just go through your playlist.
That's true.
Okay, so we've gone through our top 10 now. You did your just top 9 now,
That was
right?
number 9, yep.
I'll do my number 9, and then we'll take a break and go through our maybe some honorable mentions or
Okay.
talk about something other than our list, just because I want to break it up evenly as we go.
Sure.
So my number 9 is an album that I know I told you about. I know you listened to it for a hot second, and I think it just went out
We'll
your
see.
brain.
We'll see.
The album I am speaking of is called Volume 1 by Aviva.
Almost made my list.
Really?
Yep.
You see, I until I sat down to actually make my list over the last week, this wasn't even on my mind. All year, I had been like, "Oh, I'll go back to that album every now and then." And there's a couple songs off it that I really liked that I would play every now and then. And so when I was going through my list, I was listening to it and I was like, "Okay, this album. Okay, first song's pretty cool. Second song's cool. Third song's cool. Fourth song's cool. Fifth song's cool. Sixth song's cool. Seventh song's cool. Eighth song's cool. Ninth song's awesome. 10th song's great. 11th song is great. This album's got to be on my list. Like
Yeah.
every single song.
They're all good.
This album, this is exactly like when we first found out that first Halsey album, if you remember.
Oh, I remember.
There were two songs on there that I think both of us really loved.
Yeah.
Gasoline and the other one. They were both on like the deluxe edition of her album.
Colors? Something to do with colors?
I don't remember what it was, but they were both like dark, almost like scary songs.
Yeah. Almost not even music.
Well, yes. Yes,
But not in a
definitely-
negative way.
Yes, definitely like not really a through element or melody at all, just like noise and big drums and stuff. This album is a whole album full of that.
Yeah.
Every song is this dark, like sinister. Some of the songs almost feel violent, like not because of the sounds. Like some of the sounds are distorted and things like that, but like there's a lot of like creepy laughing and like circusy like background vocals.
Yep.
And like every song feels sinister, which I can't say enough. Like that's such a cool element to this album.
It's a really great descriptor for like if whether or not I'm going to like something. If you want to sell me on it, tell me it sounds sinister and I'll
for
listen
sure.
to it.
Yes. But even on top of that, every song is so catchy. It's so well written. And so I did just a tiny bit of research on her the other day because since this album came out, she's released 3 new singles that all, if they were on this album, it would have been probably my top 2 albums of the year. Like they are just as good as the songs on this album, except maybe a little bit more better because they have like acoustic guitar and a little bit more like normal elements to them. And it's just such a
I
good
haven't listened to
album.
those singles, yeah. I actually just told my sister to listen to this album like yesterday because I was like, "You're gonna like this a lot, so listen to it." Because she sent me that song I sent you earlier, that made you do a little crisis, and then I was like, "Oh,
If
sent
you
me
like that,
yeah,
listen
if
to
you
this.
like that, listen to this."
For sure. I looked on her website the other day because, and which, funnily enough, well, not funnily enough, I'm very happy to say that on her website you can buy her CD for just $7.99.
Nice.
So I'm
nice.
I'm sure it's like $5 shipping, but like,
Sure.
you can't buy her CD on Amazon or anything like that. You can't. This is a digital only album, other than on her website.
Yeah, the only thing that kept this album off of my list is that I have listened to it less than the Amaranth album. I have probably listened to less, but I was like, well, Amaranth, they have all the songs sound the same. They're all good in their own way. Perfect. This will be fine. And then all of the rest of the albums I've listened to more than this one. So I was like, well, I can't put it on there just based on quantity of plays alone, but I think it probably would have been better if probably would have made it if I'd listened to it more.
Yeah.
Because like Blame It on the Kids all by itself is like, what an excellent song.
Dude, and Psycho. You keep calling me a psycho. I
Yep,
think you
that's a
might
good
be
one.
right though. Like it's great.
So good.
And the I will say one of the negatives about it is like every song is basically the exact same song. Like
Yes, that's true.
There are 3 songs in a row on this album that are all 3 minutes and 19 seconds in length. Like all 3 of them, the exact same length, structured the exact same way with the same tempo, but they feel individual enough in that they all have their own little elements. But the coolest thing about the album, with the exception of the last song, which is the GDAF song,
Yep.
that song's the only song that clearly I believe she wrote like first and like doesn't fit with the rest of the album at all, but it's funny and
Fair.
stuff, so it's like we'll throw it on. It's
Yeah.
also the only
It's a good
song.
last song.
Yeah, it is. It's the only song on there that has any swearing or that's an explicit one.
Mm-hmm.
Which, by the way, that's one of the things I love about Spotify, by the way. Every song that has explicit lyrics in it, it has an explicit like
Yeah, a little E next
tag
to it.
by it. Which is not something that I would ever have been able to get before.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, like The Used, this album has the parental guidance sticker on there
Yeah.
right here.
But you don't know.
But I would
where.
have no clue. Not that that means anything, but
Right.
so yeah, that was Aviva Volume 1. Highly recommend to anyone that likes Lights, which we know we love,
Yep,
or
love
Halsey or
Lights.
anything like that. Okay, so now do you want to talk about? Should we go through our best songs?
See, I don't know what to do about best song. I mean, no, I guess I did have one, but I can't remember the damn name of it, and I don't remember. Oh yes, it's by Architects. That's right.
Well, I don't have to talk about this too much, so much as just list what the 3 songs are.
Yeah.
So
Ooh, there's a new one. Go ahead.
So for me, the song of the year by like a big wide margin is Holy Roller by Spirit Box. I think
Oh, sure.
of everything I heard all year, Spirit Box, just like the second I heard it, I was like, this is the future of metal. Like straight up. This is the future of metal because this is the most perfect sounding heavy song I've ever heard in my life. Like this Holy Roller is the Satisfy by Nero of the metal genre.
Oh God, Satisfy is.
That was one of my top played songs on Spotify this year, and it is every year.
I can't. It hurts me deeply that Satisfy is the only Satisfy, and that it ends.
Yeah, for sure. Yes, I know, dude. I know. To me, that's the best sounding music I've ever heard in my life ever. Like for those of you who don't know, we're talking about the song "Satisfy" by the band Nero. Just look it up; it will change your life.
It will.
To me, Holy Roller by Spirit Box is the heavy music version of that.
Okay.
Because it is the most. It is. Well, first of all, I experienced it through reaction videos. And it's the most perfect reaction song of all time.
That's a good one,
because
yeah.
the video is like horrifying. It's based off of Midsommar, the movie, so it's like terrifying. The woman who's in it, who used to be the vocalist for I Wrestled a Bear Once, is just destroys the vocals. It's only screaming. There's no singing in it at all. It's amazing.
She's killer. She's really good.
But the way the song is mixed to feel as huge as possible, the technicality of what's being played, but it still sounds like it's kind of like Satisfy is a cheating almost, because it's basically just once they found the most perfect sounds in the world, they just put them in a row. You know, like you couldn't have a more complicated bass part and have it still sound that big and thick, because it's just the same note that's like the most perfect note ever. That's what Satisfy is.
Yeah.
That's the same thing with this. It's basically the same key, the same thing the whole time. It's just heavy the whole time, but they still managed to create a song with this amazing, creepy atmosphere with incredible vocals. That band only has 4 songs out as far as I know right now. I assume they're all going to make it on their album. I assume it's going to be album of the year next year. Spoiler alert. Like, I would be shocked if it's not in my top 12, maybe not album of the year, because Raunchy also has an album supposed to be coming out next year. And Diablo Swing Orchestra also has an album that's supposed to be coming out next year. And they have been working super hard on that. Diablo Swing Orchestra has been working on their new album during the pandemic. This whole time they've had like way longer to work on it. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for that album. Anyway, so Holy Roller by Spirit Box is my number 1. My number 2 is a song that I accidentally stumbled on with my nephew called American Cars by the artist Annie. And it is like just a cool throwback 80s synth song. It's fantastic. It's just a great song. I recommend it to anybody. So that's American Cars by Annie. Her whole album was really good, but not good enough to make it on my list.
I see.
Which it's funny. One of the really cool thing about using Spotify throughout the year was that at any point I could just stand in my living room and go, "Hey Google, play whatever kind of music I say." You know, I can play death metal, and she'll play whatever, and it's random from from a Spotify playlist that's just a death metal playlist. And so several times throughout the year when my nephew and I were playing Minecraft or something, I would just be like, "Hey Google, play dark wave music or synth wave music."
Yeah.
Because I know that's something he enjoys, the sort of 80s throwback sounds, even though he doesn't really know much about it or anything. And so we would be listening, and if something caught our ear, I'd be like, "Hey, add that to my liked songs on Spotify."
Yeah.
And I did that with 2 songs, this song and a song by Dead Astronauts. And the Dead Astronauts haven't released a new album since 2017, so I just kind of ignored them for now. Hopefully they have a new album next year, because they're a really cool throwback 80s synth band too. This album, but there was a few really cool throwback 80s synth albums. And so American Cars by Annie. And then the other song that I have to mention as just a great song is called Talk About Me by the band, or the artist Scott, Skott. And I will talk more about her and that song later on in my list.
Very good. I only have one for this particular segment. It's Animals by Architects. And I sent it to you, and you made a comment about him and his edgy swearing, which I thought was excessively stupid. But as soon as I heard this song, I thought, if this album is as good as this song, this is going to be number 1 for next year. And it's a really interesting situation.
So they don't have an album out in 2020 then, right?
Not yet.
Okay.
It'll be out February 26th.
Oh, okay, that's great.
Yeah, here's a really weird thing about this album. First of all, it's 15 songs. It's an hour long.
Okay.
Which is already, like, if I'm going to get this quality for this long, then I dare anyone to be better than this album. Second of all, the entire album is listed track by track on YouTube Music, and only the single is actually playable. Everything else is visible but cannot be played. And I've never come across this presentation of an album before.
Oh, that happens all the time on Amazon.
Okay, sure.
Yeah,
All
on
right.
Amazon, that's like a standard thing. Because as bands release singles,
Yeah, maybe it's not as weird that I think then, but like it looks like there's another one that has appeared since I last checked called Black Lungs that I have not listened to yet.
okay, well, you'll have to
But
listen to that.
yeah, I'm definitely going to listen to that. But I don't know anything about Architects. They're new to me. But I tell you what, man, Animals, if this album is as good as that song, then good luck. Good luck the rest of the year.
That's always like a special, like if for some reason Spirit Box like totally whiffed it and the rest of the album sucked.
Yeah.
That's such a big bummer. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that's going to happen with that, and hopefully it won't happen with the Architects. Is that what?
Just Architects. But the album is
Architects.
called For Those That Wish to Exist. And last year, I made the comment, if this album coming up is as good as this song of the album of the year, and I was almost right.
Oh,
We'll talk about that later.
Okay. You are on to your number 8, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
which might be on your list as well. It is More Than Just a Name by Infected Mushroom.
Oh, okay. It's not.
It's not? Okay.
No.
I have
Did that come out back in like at the beginning of the year?
I don't think it was that long ago. Let's see. If you go to their Wikipedia page and you click on an album name, More Than Just a Name, it sends you to the Hebrew version of that Wikipedia page.
Oh,
And it's the most wild thing. It's like it's backwards. I feel like I'm on the inside of my computer looking out. Oh, it came out in March, so you're right.
okay. But I do know what you mean. Okay, I did listen to it, so okay.
Yeah. And I was going to say, I don't think that my standards for what makes an Infected Mushroom album good are as high as yours, because I learned of them through you. But I really like this album a lot. And I spend most of my time listening to it while I'm doing other things, like mostly like playing Overwatch or some other thing online.
Well, it's mostly
so,
an instrumental album.
Yeah, for sure. Which is, is that not common for them?
No, yes, it is common. Yeah, I would say for the most part, yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I don't have too much to say about it, really. I just know that I like it a lot.
It's funny because back when we were into music and we would talk a lot more frequently. I know I tried to get you into Infected Mushroom like a couple times, and you didn't. It didn't
Sometimes
really
it
stick.
takes work.
It didn't really stick. But then like it was like 2 years, or maybe it was even 3 years ago at this point. I think it was like 2 years ago where you're like, man, I love Infected Mushroom, and I was like you and I've never actually talked about Infected Mushroom.
Well, I always remembered what you said about what you like
Right.
about the way they make songs, and I think it was a situation where I just sort of like maybe I came across them organically, or something crossed my mind where I started listening to it. I was like, man, this really is good stuff. But I always
because-
remember that the way that they build every verse.
And it
you
always
talked
it
about.
surprised me too, because when you fell in love with Infected Mushroom, it was on their Return to the Sauce album, I think,
Yes,
right?
I think so.
Which is interesting because that was them, as the album title implies, that was them going back to like their psy-trance roots. Whereas they had released 3 albums before that had songs like that, but the whole album was not that. It was there was more metal influence and there was a lot more like hip hop influence.
Okay.
And that was what got me into them in the first place. And then I was able to go back and appreciate the psy-trance, because Infected Mushroom is the only trance band that I enjoy.
Is
And
Crystal
there's other
Method
things
trance,
I've
do you think?
No.
Okay.
No. But Infected Mushroom, now their last 2 albums, which they had an album come out last year, there was the NASA and the 2 Amish boys or whatever,
Yeah.
which was they considered it an EP, even though it was like 40 minutes long or whatever, which is kind
Yeah,
of funny.
7 songs, 48 minutes.
Yeah, which is this one is just nine songs and it's like 50 minutes or whatever, right? Like
60,
it's,
yeah, an hour.
So it's way longer, but it's a couple tracks longer. But like, I have full length albums on my list that are less than their EP, which that's just, I guess, what happens with progressive music, and they're different progressive music.
For
But
sure.
I'm so glad that you like it and that you appreciate that, because I would not think that you would enjoy the like trance side of them. I would think you would be way more into the like more metal or dubstep or like
I love trance,
stuff like that. So
I mean, if I had, once again, it goes back to our conversation about house music. Like, give me a list of bands that are trance, and I'll let you know how I feel about this genre
right,
after
for
that.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, well, to me, the thing that was great about them, and we've said it a million times, and you even alluded to it, was that we've talked about like every 8 bars they change the song. No matter what it is, every 8 bars they even if it's just adding a hi hat rhythm or something.
Yeah, they add a layer to it.
And I don't know if have you ever watched any of their YouTube videos?
No, I haven't.
Oh, dude, it will blow your mind into a million pieces.
Like in like the making of videos
Yes,
or what?
they just sit at their computer, like the two most badass cool dudes in the world, and the guy just sits there like this, and he just like uses his mouse, and they just clicks and like they solo stuff, and they're just like, oh, what do we do here? Oh yeah, that's pretty cool. Solo that track. Oh, that sounds cool. Why isn't that in the song? You know, like they just sit there and they do this, and then the guy with the long hair, I forget his name, he'll be like, oh, this is what we played. Like this crazy complicated thing, and the other guy will just grab the mic and be like, hey, and then they'll play like what actually is in the song, and it's just crazy, like they're so great because
What a process.
their music is just audio manipulation. Like there's not much music to it at all. It's just audio manipulation.
Very cool.
But they insist on playing everything. So everything that you hear is played by them or sung by the singer. And then it's just run through so many filters and so many things. And watching them talk about how they do it is so freaking entertaining. And it's so like they give you so many tips that are really worthwhile if you make electronic music. I highly recommend watching them on YouTube.
I'll check it out.
Check out any of their videos. Okay, on to my number 8. This is one I told you about several times and tried to get you to listen to, and you're like, blah. This is the album Break Yourself by Elephant Room. And this is a different album for me because this is the only hip hop album that I've fallen in love with from the last decade. You know, since Jurassic 5 stopped being a hip hop group, this is the only thing that I've really fallen in love with. There have been a couple Mayday albums that I like, but like, and I listened to this album just again this morning so I could like get a feel for it. And I was listening to it and I was like, I don't know if this album is really good enough to be on my list. But at the end, I decided to keep it where I had it at my number 8 because it's so different and special to me because I don't listen to hip hop ever really. And it's just, every song is great. It's catchy. The beats are great. It's all very simple. Like this sounds like an album I could make, which is an interesting measure that I use when I listen to stuff. Usually if I listen to something and it's something that I could make, that's a really negative thing for me to say because I suck. but other times, you know, like a lot of the times I base how much I like something over whether or not it's the kind of music that I hear in my head. You know, I've talked about that a lot with things like when we first discovered Clayton and Cell Dweller and Scandroid and stuff. I was like, this is the music that I've heard in my head for my whole life. I just never heard it out the way that it was being made. This is like hip hop music that I hear in my head with someone else filling in the verses. Even though it's so simple, it's just the same beat basically. And then the album is really interesting because halfway through they have this really cool song called Lucifer, and the guy just sings the whole time, and there's a band playing with bass, drums, guitar, and it's just a band, and it's a blues song, and it's awesome, and it's nothing like anything else on the rest of the album, and it's great. And then they go back to hip hop, and they have like one song that's like got this piano, and the song is called Sad Piano Song. And I'm like, I love that kind of like self-referential stuff. Like if you're going to make a hip hop album, you got to have the sad piano song on it because it's just the way hip hop works. And it's just a cool throwback hip hop album with great vocals all throughout and catchy choruses that aren't necessarily sung. They're just more rapping, but just repeating the rapping part, which isn't something I normally care for, but in this case, it works really great. They have 2 guys that rap in each of the songs. So it is a group, it is a band that performs. And in doing more research about them to get ready for this, I found out that they have like a whole like metal EP where they just got together as a band and went to the studio and recorded these heavy guitar riffs and stuff, kind of like the old Cypress Hill album, Skull and Bones. And then the guys rap over it and sing over it, and it's great. They have kind of a bit of a cool, like, southern bluesy twanginess to them that I enjoy with hip hop. It's not super annoying like Cottonmouth Kings or Insane Clown Posse or anything like that, even though I do like songs by those groups, but it's kind of that same sort of southern country hip hop stuff. Though the music isn't really very country, it's much more bluesy. but the beats are great. They're in your face. They're heavy. The mastering could be a little better, and the volume from song to song kind of varies more than I would like. It seems a little bit amateur in that regard, the mixing, but it's great. I think it deserves number 8 on my spot. Number 8
Awesome.
spot on my list.
Excellent. So number 7 is "Do You Feel Okay" by a band called Picturesque. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Picturesque. They're another emo staple that I've only just gotten into this year. This album actually falls really well in line with the Slaves album. But it is better. It's a little bit more interesting. And there's one very specifically interesting piece of this album. And I think I sent you this. In one of the songs called "Pray," there's a chord progression that is exactly the same as it is in a Kimbra song.
Yep, you did. You said that to me. Yep.
And I heard that, and it bounced around in my head for like a week and a half. Like, I know this progression. What is this from? What on earth is this from? And it's from "Cameo Lover" by Kimbra from 10 years ago. And it was one of those things, you hear it and it just kept digging dirt. Oh, it's like, oh, it's buried. It's coming to the surface. It's almost here. And figuring out that they are almost the same, only in that little spot. It's a completely different song, but the progression in the chorus has that same exact thing that's in the last chorus of that Kimber song specifically. And it was like, oh man, when I figured that out, it was like a waterfall of relief trying to get that figured out.
You mentioned that, and I was like, this is awesome. Like, what great detective work.
Did you hear it when you listened?
I did.
Yeah.
It didn't surprise me because it would be impossible for you to come up with a melody or a riff that hasn't been already done hundreds of times. So it didn't surprise me, but like anytime you can figure that out and make that connection, it's like really cool, especially between such disparate genres of music.
And I haven't listened to Kimbra or that album specifically in 6 years. And so it took a long time, but this happens to me every once in a while where I'll hear something and go, I know what that is. Because at first I was like, is this a cover? Like it rang true in such a way where I was like, excuse me? I know that. That progression. But yeah, otherwise, great album. I don't know much about Picturesque, but if you like Kimbra, no, I wouldn't say it's a terrible recommendation, but yeah, I don't know. It's great. It's
interesting to me how many of your bands are sort of sonically similar without having heard anything really. Like they're all sort of like heavy metalcore, not metalcore, heavy like emo-y, like you said emo, but
yeah, and it's I don't know what else to call it, but and there's so much more to it than that. Like if you're only like if you hear emo and you think like Good Charlotte, then first of all, I'm sorry that you feel that way because emo does a lot of really good stuff that is beyond that. But yeah, I don't know. My music taste has evolved quite a bit. Like there was a time when this kind of music I would have considered unlistenable, and now it's like so many of these types of bands are in my rotation. But maybe it has something to do with the evolution of the genre too. Like they have added so many production elements and so much there's so much mood and atmosphere in the music.
Well, I was going to say, not having heard most of these bands that you've mentioned so far, do they all have like, not necessarily a keyboard player, but do they all have like electronic elements in them?
I would say so, yeah. If even just from a production perspective, where it's not just a live band sound for sure. It's got so much more meat to it than that. And
it's funny because we could talk about this all day, but like, when you and I were younger, like in high school age and stuff, like at the time, if you were a metal band and you had a keyboard player or you used keyboards, your band was considered like a wussy band,
Yeah, like there's nothing, like, yeah, absolutely correct. Like nothing is softer than listening to something like Nightwish. And it's like, that is, like, I remember hearing that one of the least metal things that Metallica ever did was the S&M album where they played with the orchestra. And it's like, excuse me? Like that. What about every single orchestral metal band that exists that is more metal than anything you've ever seen? Like, that's more metal than your car.
It's just interesting how... And, the reason for that is because the bands now that we're listening to are our age. They're the guys, they're made up of people our age or way younger. Yeah. Like, I See Stars as a great example of that because they grew up listening to the stuff we listened to. But, like just this year alone, I started to see bands that were influenced by Breaking Benjamin. Like I could tell, like I would listen to something and be like, I am so excited that we've gotten to the point where young adults grew up listening to Breaking Benjamin and Linkin Park, which Linkin Park is a little bit overdone in terms of their influence on the musical world, the heavy musical world. But like, who gives a crap? Like all those bands are really cool. You know, we talked about with like Danger Kids and that kind of stuff. But I found some cool bands this year that I'm like listening to it and I'm like, these guys like Breaking Benjamin. That's awesome. Like I love that kind of stuff. And with metal, it's the same kind of thing. Like when I was in high school, I loved stuff like In Flames and Soilwork and Children of Bodom, things like that. They always had those elements in there, but that wasn't really a thing in European music, European metal.
Yeah,
it was just
true.
the United States was just like metal was supposed to be aggressive and angry, you know? And I think that's because it was all based off of, like you said, like Metallica and Slayer. And even though those bands, you know, Slayer's not from the United States, right? Or I thought
That's
Slayer
a really
was
good
British.
question. I think you're right.
Actually, you know what? We're talking about things that I shouldn't be talking about because I don't know enough about
No,
them.
Slayer is. They're from Huntington Park, California.
Okay. But anyway, I think it's just, you know, whatever. It's just different generations. But
Yeah.
I think
That's
we're
a really
both making
good point.
the point.
And I
like,
think that's a really interesting thing where it's like, maybe that is it. Maybe it is the evolution of the genre that it's starting to incorporate all of these really great electronic elements and adding it to just make the lows beefier with more meat to them
100%.
and just all this other stuff. Like that's why I'm falling further and further into this genre that, 15 years ago I wouldn't have touched.
it's a much more rare thing now to hear like a raw metal album.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's bad. I think that
No.
makes those albums special in their own way whereas they wouldn't have stood out before at all.
But my favorite thing to happen to heavy music is electronics.
100%.
Absolutely.
100%. Okay, now we're on to my number 7, was it?
Yes.
Okay, so this is one I mentioned earlier when I was talking about my songs. This is the album Always Live for Love by Scott.
Okay.
So this is Skott. Write this down, Chris. You're going to want to listen to it.
I will do that.
So it's 12 songs, and every one of them is great. There's not a negative song on the album, which I will say that is definitely something that I pay attention to a lot more now. Speaking of like growing up musically, like if I have 2 albums that I like sort of the same, and there's one has 13 songs and they're all great, and one has 11 songs and they're all great, the one with 13 wins.
Yeah, it's got 2 more great songs.
Now it gets a little trickier when like this album has 10 songs and 5 of them are the greatest thing in the world, and this album has 13 songs and they're all really good, but they don't reach. That's when you have to like get into like personal opinion and stuff, which obviously it's all objective anyway.
Right.
But or subjective. But anyway, this album, Scott. This album is really special to me because it reminds me of one of my favorite albums of all time, which is an album, I think it was just self-titled, by Curly, Kerli, which I talked about with you on the Music Room a couple times, but it wasn't anything that you ever like knew that much about. And this is an album I grew up with, like from in high school I discovered this. And she was a pop star who came out with an album in the United States, and she was from Estonia. And her album is like this sweet, dark pop music that no one was making music like that at the time. It was a mixture of like Bjork sounding stuff with just pop music of the time, but everything had this like cool Nordic like and I know Estonia is not a Scandinavian country, but this like cool sort of like almost Scandinavian like dark fairy tale feeling to the whole album. Well, so this lady, Scott, she is from Sweden, and her voice sounds similar at times to Curly. And
Okay.
Curly, as an artist herself, still makes music now, but she released this album that I'm talking about, which I can't remember what the album is called. It doesn't matter. This old album is old, although it's still one of my favorites. But she had never really released an album that was like that at all ever again. I think that was a case of putting the right producer with the right pop artist to create like magic. You know what I mean? And that's what this is. There's a bit of a trip hop feel to this. It's dark throughout, but it's much more happy than the Becca Stevens thing that I mentioned earlier.
Okay.
That album is darker the whole time, not like the Aviva thing at all.
Sure.
Though sonically, some of the stuff is more like Aviva, but where the Aviva stuff is like noises and industrial sounding almost, This has real elements to it. Like every song has programmed drums, and they're like dancey drums and things. They're not necessarily four to the floor, but they sound. It's a much more warm sounding album as opposed to the Aviva, which is very cold sounding in my opinion. But the songs are just really well written, and they have really catchy choruses and melodies and stuff. And I'll come back to that in a second. But the variety is on this album is really great. She has the song that I mentioned earlier in my favorite songs of the year called "Talk About Me," and I think it's one of my favorite pop songs I've ever heard. It is so catchy, and the whole song is about how, like the chorus is, in your neighborhood in California, you'll be talking about me. From the something to the something, they'll be talking about me. Something where in Key Largo in Florida, they'll be talking about me. In Colorado, they'll be talking about me. And the whole song is about how people are going to be talking about her. And the whole time you're listening to it, you think it's about her talking about how great she is. And then at the very end, there's one line where she says kids on the playground are going to be laughing and pointing and talking about her. And all of a sudden, with that one vocal line, it's like,
Ooh.
did she just change the whole meaning of this song?
I love it. I love
Like,
that.
did what I was thinking it meant the whole time now mean something different? Now, is it just a stupid pop song? Yes, totally, 100%. But that is like the perfect example of like, if you listen to this album and you sit and you listen to this album, it just has so many sweet little treats to it. And a lot of them are musical. Like there's a lot of cool musical stuff. There's a lot of like one of her songs. It actually, it's so funny because it kind of reminds me of the Aviva album a little bit, in that Aviva has all these like la 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 moments and like creepy moments. She does that, but it's like
I love all of her album art. Every one of these has such a fantastic series of art.
And the cool thing about that is those were like singles she released by the artwork is by the same artist, and then the actual album artwork is sort of like a combination of all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, she like this is her only album she's ever released as far as I can see.
Yep, EP
and
in 2018, but that's it.
Yeah, and that's not even available on Spotify. Whatever you're looking at there is not on Spotify.
Okay, YouTube Music.
Yeah,
4
so
songs.
the only thing of hers that is available on Spotify is this album. And it's just solid. It's just so solid. And what I wanted to bring up, what I was talking about melody and stuff, is that I said this like off the top of my head when I was doing one of my reaction/review videos, but it was a thought that is so obvious, but it had never occurred to me before, and I had never thought of it in musical sense. And I said, it was in my Mook video, it said, I said that you can't feel nostalgic about something unless you have a base of understanding prior to experiencing it for the first time. Which, that's what nostalgia is, right? It's something that feels comfortable and familiar to you because you've experienced it before. And I have talked about this for years and years without really understanding it, I don't think, to this degree. But when I would listen to the Zac Brown Band, for example, I would listen to it and I would always say, like, I heard this song for the first time, and I know I was hearing it for the first time, but it felt familiar to me. It felt comfortable to me because just for some reason, it felt like I'd heard it before. And in my head, and I've even said it on the Music Room, in my head, what that meant to me was I equated that with good songwriting. So to me, good songwriting, at least one example of good songwriting, was a sense of familiarity and comfortableness that makes it feel similar to a nostalgic feeling, even though you're hearing it for the first time.
I feel like I had something similar with Band of Horses when I was a big fan of theirs. There was something melancholic about their music that fit nostalgically in my mind so well. It just harkened back to a time like old prairie living in a way that you would never expect, and was like, I wasn't in a Great Depression, but
Right.
something about this makes me think of that as if I were, and it's a really complicated thought process. But that was the thing that I loved the most about their first few albums, was how much it evoked that sensation.
And I love that. Like my favorite music that I've ever heard, because I'm the type of person, a lot of my opinion of music is based off of the first time I hear it. Like, and there are a lot of albums that I love that took time to grow on me, but for the most part, when I hear something, if I love it, like I'm just in that moment, like absorbing it like a sponge,
Yeah.
like as much as possible. And in this Scott album, which is why I'm talking about this right now, even though it like kind of permeates everything, all of the music that I like, this Scott album, the moment I heard it, from song to song to song to song, I was just like, this is incredible, because every song is giving me that feeling of nostalgia, even though I know it's not nostalgia. It's a
love
feeling
it.
that's similar to it.
I'm really
And
looking forward to listening to this.
Yeah, and so that's why it's like, especially with that Curly, like that Curly album is such a unique album. Like throughout my life, I've encountered like maybe like 10 female vocal pop albums that were just like, you put the right producer with the right pop singer and they just made a masterpiece of an album that was that they never tried to recreate. You know, they went on and made generic pop music or whatever, or they quit music altogether. But like, there's just this one album, and like Gem is like that, Fifi Dobson is like that, Goldfrapp is like that. There's certain
Carl
artists.
Emerald is like that.
There's certain albums that are just like perfect masterpiece albums, and they are because of the elements that were put together, came together, lightning struck. And it just was perfect. And that's what this is to me. This is another
The Black
one of
Album by
those.
Metallica is one of the best examples on earth of that.
Yeah.
Because they were self-produced up on their first 4 albums, and then they got a producer, Bob Rock, and he brought them into the modern age of music with the production that he brought to the table, and they made the Black Album, which is one of the greatest albums of all time.
Right.
And then after that, even though Bob Rock was their producer until 2005, everything went in a weird direction, where it's like they never made that happen again.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why the Scott album is so important to me and why it's so high on my list. Because we're getting now to the point where from here on my list is just like fantastic stuff. I mean, everything was great before that.
Sure.
But
But
this
yeah,
is
you get to the top 5, and it's like every one
Yeah.
of these entries is going to take 20 minutes
for
to talk
sure.
about.
For sure. Okay.
Number 6. I'm growing less confident that this is on your list. This is one of the ones I thought we were going to share.
Do you want me to say what I think it is?
Yes?
Poppy's album.
No. It is the
Oh,
Birthday
boy.
Massacre album. Diamonds.
Get This
can't
album
tell.
does not deserve to be on any top 12 list. You fool. You have messed up. This is terrible. This album sucks. I didn't even write that down
You
on
were
anything.
so excited about it the first time you listened to it.
No, I was texting you and I remember this sucks. This sucks. This sucks. Oh, this song could be really cool. Nope, this sucks. I have the text to prove it. This album sucks, Chris. Oh, Birthday Massacre. Okay, go ahead.
I can't believe when you were going on and on about your biggest disappointment, this deep disappointment, I thought it's either
Chris,
going to be
it's
Birthday
so bad.
Massacre or it's
It's-
going to be on the list.
It's so bad, I didn't even think to include it.
Amazing.
To me, this album doesn't even exist. And I listened to it a couple weeks ago, and I was listening to it, and I was like, this is the most perfect example of a band who has been a band for too long, continuing to make the exact same music for too long. And Chris, you know how much I love the Birthday Massacre.
I know you do.
And they're still
That's why I
making the
couldn't
exact
decide.
same music that they did in 2005. And that's great, because it's great. But there's not one single special thing about this album. Not
Here's
one.
the thing.
Okay.
Here's the thing.
But you can like it all you want.
This is a problem that we have with all of the stuff we disagree on. Your idea of the Birthday Massacre is significantly different than mine.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Your favorite album by them is what?
Walking with Strangers.
Great. That is from 100 years ago.
It is quite a while ago.
I did not listen to them once until Superstition.
Right.
And I did not listen to Under Your Spell, which you consider to be one of their best albums.
Second
which
best.
was the one before last. So
Correct.
it's like the only things that you use to rate how good the Birthday Massacre is are the things of theirs I've never heard.
Right.
So my bar is so much lower. And I like this album quite a bit. It reminds me a lot of Superstition in a way that it is exactly the same as Superstition.
Right. It is.
But that one was on my top 12 also.
It just, Chris, like there's not very many bands on the planet that I know more about than the Birthday
understand.
Massacre. And when I say that, I mean like music. Like I mean like on this album, the 5th song has the best sounding drums on that album, and
Yeah.
like the hi-hat on track 7 on their 3rd album is like whatever. Like
Yeah.
like yeah, this
I understand.
I'm so glad that you like it though. Like
I do
I
like
am.
it, and I
am.
need to listen to Under Your Spell more because that album is fantastic. I've listened to it maybe one time,
yeah.
but I know that it's good because you forced me to.
When I was
Yes.
when I was texting you about it while I was listening to this for the first time, I was like, you need to go back and listen to Your Spell. You're like, I haven't heard that one. I was like, what the hell? Dude,
Yeah.
go back. Like it's really good, and you
This-
did, and so
And the fact that it's number 6 is only just a reflection of how weak music has been for me personally this year with how busy I've been not listening to music. But
that
every
makes sense.
album in front of this is a better album than this. So that's the best I can
I
offer
would
you.
really hope so. I mean, I'm just shocked.
I love
Like,
how
really.
upset you are.
Because I just
That's what makes for good TV. Damn
like
it.
I really hope like the Birthday Massacre never sees this because I love every single person in that band.
Well, it's okay
know?
because you love them, and it's okay. I don't know, like they
I
think
know,
they'd be
but, like,
happier with the fact that you've been a fan of theirs for 15 years.
But I just want to slap them all in the face and say, please get a new producer.
Yeah,
Pick up
I
a different
understand.
instrument. Put some acoustic guitar on one of your albums, for God's sake. Do anything. Write a rap song. I don't care. Do a live album. Something to, but I don't know if you know, well, you probably don't, but like they just recently started their Patreon
Okay.
account. And so because they haven't been able to tour all year.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
so they've been trying to get people to join their Patreon. And so I was thinking about it because they're doing like monthly live chats where you can go chat with them. They're releasing all sorts of like old demos and stuff. They have a book that they released, all sorts of stuff that they've got going. And well, first of all, I mean, I don't have enough money to give to them. Otherwise I would, because I have contributed to all of their like,
Yeah.
all their pledge music campaigns and stuff, but it just let's move on.
That's all we needed from this entry was your reaction to it. Please continue. Your number 6.
Okay, my
I
number
wish
6.
that I could hate something. I wish you were going to say "Beautiful Oblivion" by Issue, so I could go.
Yeah, and I don't think you're gonna really know
I won't.
too much of mine
I
from
won't
here
do
on.
it.
My number 6 though is "Things We Do for Love" by The Sounds,
Great.
which you talked about, so we
Hot
can move on.
damn.
That's
All
my
right,
number
so-
6. Just to point it out, that's my number 6.
So it
So-
probably makes you even more angry that was my number 10 and that Birthday Massacre got 4 spots above it.
It doesn't make me angry because that you're just wrong. I mean,
That's
about the Birthday
fine.
Massacre.
I'll allow it. I will allow it.
I mean, it just.
I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong for being upset. I will allow
I mean,
it.
I can't blame you for being ignorant to the Birthday Massacre.
That's
the way
true.
You are. I mean,
And
it just,
I am. That's what I am.
If this was the only album of theirs I'd ever heard, I would probably think it was like one of the best albums of the year too. So
Great.
just like someone who saw what's the fourth Star Wars movie that was made?
New Hope.
No, the fourth one, like the fourth one too.
Oh yeah, the Phantom Menace, the first
yeah, the
one.
terrible one that everyone hates.
Yeah, that
If
garbage.
Little kids that saw that for the first time and thought
Yeah.
Star Wars is great.
Yeah.
This is the same thing.
I love the Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
Said nobody ever.
Yeah.
Okay, number
Okay, number
5.
5.
A band I've never liked or heard of before called 4 Years Strong.
No. I have this. This is on my not my potential, but this was an album I listened to a sample of. I liked it enough to add it to my list, and I listened to the whole thing like maybe once or twice throughout the year, and I never went back to it then. So okay,
Yeah, Brain
I
Pain
can
by
picture
4
the-
Years Strong.
I can picture the cover art so clearly in my head. So
Yes, it's brown.
that's great. It's got like little stuff on it, like it's like a animated thing. But anyway,
Yes. And this one took a while, but every time I listened to it, I was like, man, yeah, because this isn't really a genre of music that I'm a huge fan of. Like this, I think this probably falls in like the Rise Against territory. Maybe it's got more of a punk sort of theme in it.
yeah,
Yeah, pop punk maybe.
yeah.
No, I don't know.
But
Maybe
there's a little bit of
something
like
that.
there's still a little bit of that sort of like metalcore like heaviness to it.
Yeah, there is.
It's in there.
But it is. It's very Rise Against. It's about like vocal style and music style.
It doesn't have that like shiny electronic polishy stuff that we were talking about before, though.
Right, and that's another reason why it is something where it's like, why would I would not necessarily think that I would like this, but because it is also very much just like traditional dudes in a band. shouting their lyrics about whatever else, but it's a lot of fun. This music doesn't get to be fun very often. It's usually talking about something to be mad about, but it's more fun than not. And it's fantastic. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't have anything else to say about either. I'm shocked that there was something that you had on your list that I had on my list that, like, other than stuff that we both love, that I was aware of.
Yeah, and I'll have quite a bit more to say about the top 4. But
okay, maybe you are the one that told me about that one or something.
I might have been, because I was probably like, man, I've been really enjoying this more than I expected. Give it a shot.
Okay,
like
my number 5 is a comeback from an artist that I have been wanting to at least attempt to come back for, like, at this
very
point
exciting.
now, like a decade or more. And so I'm talking about The Lost Art of Longing by BT.
Oh, it has been a while since you've talked
So
about BT.
you, being a fan of Infected Mushroom and having never really got into BT, who is, by the way, referred to as the godfather of house music and also the godfather of trance music, because he is credited with bringing it to the United States in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
This album, finally, after so many years of him messing around with granular synthesis and all sorts of BS that is just way over my head, to the point of, like, I'm not some Juilliard graduate, like, sit down and look at the music score as I'm reading it. No, thank you. Get that out of here. Or I'm not looking for music to fall asleep by. That's what his granular synthesis stuff has been. It's just like, I have one of his whole... You got some problems there?
Don't mind me.
Down?
It's a very small cat-related earthquake.
Anyway, he's been doing a lot of stuff for the last decade, basically, that has been disappointing to me. And then he did... The most disappointed I've ever been in a musical project is when I gave him like $75 or something to contribute to his... I'm going to redo all my songs with an orchestra. And he did that, and it was terrible. It was horrible.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, and how the Mozart of electronic music messed that up so bad is beyond me. I think there was a lot of stuff going on with that project. But anyway, we're here to talk about The Lost Art of Longing, which is the only CD that I bought this whole year that feels like a premium CD product. Like this, it smells good. It's in a nice package. Every other CD I bought is like, it looks cheap compared to it. So who cares about the packaging? No one. But it's, so what this album is it feels like a very cool mingling of modern electronic music, the way modern electronic pop music is made, putting that together with his sort of early 2000s, maybe late 2000, like, I don't even know what you call that, from like the period from like 2005 to 2010, the late 2000s.
Yeah, late 2000s.
The late aughts, whatever.
Yeah, late aughts.
Late aughts. His music that he was making then, which was more electronic, because I fell in love with BT because he was making like breakbeat music and like hip hop music with acoustic elements and rock elements with it, and then singing over the top of it. The reason most people love him is because he created the sort of like, he didn't create, he brought house music and some trance music over to the United States in the early 90s, like I said. But this album is, okay, let me rewind for a second. Last year, he released an album that was only made using old analog 80s synthesizers. So he released a whole album of just that with one of his musical idols, whose name is Christian Burns, and he was an artist from the 80s who had some like pop songs and electronic songs and stuff. And so they released a whole album last year called under the moniker All Hail the Silence.
Oh.
And that album's really great. It's interesting. BT's music is always extremely dynamic. Like, it goes from the quietest music can be to the loudest music can be in one song, much like Archive, which is another album I was kind of thought maybe you would make it on your list, because if you're
forgot they had one.
If you're unfamiliar, Archive released an album this year that's just them taking a bunch of their like hits and making them slow ballad songs with a lady singer. So like totally what you like about Archive, but it's all their big songs remade. Anyway, so this album, BT, let me bring up my information here. It's an hour and 33 minutes long.
Good.
93
Very
minutes.
Good.
2 discs, because obviously you can't fit that on 1 disc.
Very
It's
true.
14 tracks. There's 7 tracks on the first disc, 7 tracks on the second disc. So there's 25 minutes of just instrumental, four to the floor, traditional old school BT house like trance music on here. And those 4 tracks are great. They're usually instrumental stuff like that done by someone that's not Infected Mushroom is a little boring to me because as I said earlier, Infected Mushroom changes the song every 8 measures. BT crafts a sonic, like he crafts music. That's the thing about him. Like more than any other artist I've ever listened to, you feel like every single sound was put where it was meant to be put by him, like manually. Like you feel like everything was touched by him. Unlike Infected Mushroom, where they just load a sound into a plugin and then throw it into a thing over a beat. Like there's a magic to that too, but this is so much more involved. And that's his music has become too much that recently. Like he's released like 5 like just albums that are not real music. Just like an hour and a half of this granular synthesis stuff, which I know I keep mentioning and is such a complicated thing to even try to I'm not even going to try to describe what granular synthesis is, but it's boring and stupid unless you're a
Is it
mathematician.
like wavetables and stuff?
No, it's like the art of taking a sound that's in a certain pitch and slow over such a long amount of time, changing it into something that it would never work with because it's spread out over so long. It's taking something and slowly morphing it into something that it couldn't have been unless you did it over such a long amount of time.
Okay.
Is from my understanding of it, my very basic understanding of it. But I have a whole album of his that's just that, and it's basically music made to fall asleep to. Like it's not really even music.
Yeah.
It's different. But anyway, there's 25 minutes of instrumental tracks on here, but then there's an hour and 5 minutes still of regular songs. And those regular songs range from 7 minutes to 10 minutes long. They are incredibly intricate, featuring every instrument known to man, and they're amazing. There's some break beats. There's some like heavy trap stuff on here, which is awesome because that's a style of music right now that's like hugely popular in the world. There's great female vocal pop songs on here that are amazing. All the sound effects that he uses, he records himself. So there's like one cool song starts with like waves and it's about walking into the water. And so you hear all these waves and all these things. And BT has been known throughout his whole career to use like animal sounds and different sound effects that his second album, he like went and rented a cabin and like stayed in the woods for like 6 months while he wrote this album. Like he's really nature oriented and stuff.
Yeah.
But he's also like very artistic and stuff. And like this has that side of him, like the really cool artistic, thoughtful side of him mixed with the cool electronic pop music. And like I think you would love this album a lot.
I put it on my list.
But this is a real BT album, the first one we've gotten in over a decade, in my opinion, and that's why it's my number 5.
Awesome.
Before we go to our top 4, can we go through our honorable mentions now?
Yes, I was just thinking about that because I was like, oh, we got a bunch of these and we have missed it.
Yep. Okay, so I'm just going to go through my honorable mentions first, all of them, and then you can do them. And I'm not going to talk about them very much. My number 1 is Power Man 5000. We talked about it a little bit. You were disappointed by this album. I like this album a lot, but it wasn't definitely not worth being in my top 12.
Sure.
Ellie Goulding, who is a pop star that I love. I love everything she's ever done, actually. She's like the only pop star who is great from front to back every one of her albums. I have the deluxe edition of her album, and it's really interesting. She is someone that just like shocks me with the decisions she makes when she's making music, because she does things that she shouldn't do if she wants to still be popular, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like on this album, like the first 3 or 4 songs are all like, okay, yeah, this is just like everything else on the radio. And then there's like 5 ballads in a row. Just 5 awesome, like just an acoustic guitar and her singing, which is great. There's just a piano, her playing the piano and singing. It's great. I feel like the whole album as a whole, though, has too many ballads, and there's not enough on there.
My sister loves her a lot.
Yeah, the bonus disc is great. It's got rap verses. It's got all sorts of cool stuff. And if it would have all been one disc, I maybe would have thought about it. including her, but I just had too much other stuff that was more consistently good. So I had to mention her. Then I have two bands that really I wanted to use so bad so I could talk about them, but I'm not going to. One is the first album by this band to disappoint me, even though it's still phenomenal, fantastic, great. A band that has done nothing but release 4 perfect albums in their career, and they came out with an album this year that's not perfect. And I'm talking about Hurts.
Yes, you're a big fan of them.
Yes, I am. And to say that is understating it, because
Correct.
I think they have 4, and I'm not joking when I say this. They have 4 perfect albums.
That's a hell of a claim, but it's
And if you listen to my top 12 albums of the decade that I released at the beginning of this year, their second album I think was my number 5 best album of the decade.
wow.
And that was on there because I it doesn't matter. I don't need to talk about their old albums. This album, great. It's just a little too slow. Kind of like I just said with the Ellie Goulding album.
Mm-hmm.
It's more somber of an album, which is great. I wanted that, but I wanted a few heavy moments, and I like a few of their more get up and go moments too, and this was missing that. So then I have one album that just crushed my soul when I decided not to include it. Gangsta Grass. This is the best Gangsta Grass album.
Oh, it's amazing it didn't make the list. But like you said, one of the hardest lists you've ever had to make, so that makes sense.
This is the best Gangsta Grass album. It's their best produced music Wrench has ever made. It is 100%. They jumped in and were like, a lot of it was inspired by Black Lives Matter. Sure. And the whole theme of the album kind of is inspired by that. There's a awesome cover of This Land Is Your Land, hip hop version as the last track. It's a fantastic album from front to back. It just felt short to me compared to these other albums on my list. Mm-hmm. And it just wasn't up to par with everything else. Very close, though. Very close. And then we have 2 albums that I have here that I just... Chris... Oh, one of these albums. So one of them, Static X.
Interesting. Okay.
Project Regeneration Volume 1, which makes me super excited for what's to come. Mm-hmm. So we have, and the other album that this one I'm going to show you right here this is my number 13. This is the one that I fought with myself for days over what was my number 12, because I wanted this Gray Days album to be my number 12. And that Becca Stevens album just blew me away to the point where I couldn't not have it on there. And this was the album that suffered from it. And so these 2 albums are post-mortem albums.
Yeah.
From the singers of their bands.
Interesting.
Very interesting. We got them in the same year.
Uh-huh.
And Static X, great. Wayne Static died in 2015 or something, 2014,
something like
whenever.
That, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, like 2 years ago, they started touring again with a new singer that no one has ever seen his face.
Yeah, I read about that.
Yeah.
Super weird.
No one knows who the guy is. And he's tall, just like Wayne Static was. He has the same hair. He sounds almost identical on the album. But what this album is it's a combination of all this, not all, like half the stuff that Wayne had recorded before he died, put into new songs, and then the other half of the album, the vocals are this new guy. Mm-hmm. And it's mixed. Wayne can sing a verse on a song, and then the chorus is by this new guy, which is just Mr. X or something like that. So it's not just song to song.
Yeah.
This is the best Static X album.
Wow.
It would be on my list if it was mixed a little bit better.
Yes. That is one thing I remember about that.
It's a little bit thin, and the mastering's not great. Mm-hmm. However, the songwriting, great. Feels just like every other song. Every song on here feels like it's from a different Static X album.
X, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. It is amazing. So there's that. Then there's the Gray Days album, the one I wanted to talk about so bad because this is Chester Bennington's old band.
Oh,
and I told you when I was listening to this, this is the only album that I bought. This is the only what's it called when you're in a store and you make a purchase without
impulse?
This is the only impulse music buy I bought this whole year. Every other CD I bought, was a calculated move. I saw this in Walmart, and it said, featuring vocals by Chester Bennington. It had a great package that's like a book.
Yes, I remember you being surprised by that, where you're like, here's this thing. Holy crap, it's fantastic.
I saw the sticker. It said Chester Bennington's old band, new songs. I looked at it. It was $10.99. I was like, I'm going to take a chance. And I took a chance and I brought it home and I listened to it not knowing what it was. And I sent you a message and I was like, Chris, this album is really crazy. It sounds like music from the 90s that's not annoying. Because in my opinion, all music from the 90s is very annoying.
I know. I think about that a lot.
And I listened to
How you
this
feel
and
about 90s music.
I listened to this and I thought that, and then I went and looked up what it was. And son of a gun, Chris, this was stuff that was recorded. These are vocals that were recorded by Chester Bennington when he was like 15, 16 years old.
Whoa.
In this band, Grade A's, in 1993.
Holy crap.
And then in 1994, 1995, when they were working on this album, when he was like 15, 16, 17. Still in high school. He had to get permission to go into bars because he couldn't drink to play shows with this band doing these songs. But what this album is the guy who was in that band that was like in charge of that band, who's still alive, Chester obviously not, sadly. He took all of his old vocal tracks and then he sent them to a studio to make them sound as good as they could. Mm-hmm. Then he took all those tracks and they recrafted every song around his vocals. So the songs that are on here are the songs that they did with completely different music over them.
That's fantastic.
Every one of them has like a different producer, different people that worked on them. Dave Navarro worked on this. All sorts of famous musicians worked on this and did like play bass on this track, but whatever on this track. The guy that produced it and did all of it is the drummer. So the drums sound fantastic on every song and they sound like real drums in a room. Chester's vocals are immaculate, which is disgusting to me that he could have sang this good. There's cool like female produced vocal stuff on here that's great. LP, she's a singer songwriter, lady LP. She's great. She has a song on here that she sings with him. This album is fantastic. It's so much better than it has any right to be at all. It's fantastic, and they have enough material to make 2 more albums like this.
That's fantastic.
Because they initially recorded 2 albums and a third one that was never released, and they have all the material from that. And this is fantastic. It deserves to be on my list, but I just couldn't fit it on there. If you are watching this and you have not heard this album, Gray Days, their album Amends, please go listen to it. I honestly think that this is better than every one of Linkin Park's albums except for 3 of them. But that's
all of their albums
I love
except
Linkin
3.
Park.
Yeah, I know you do. It's just funny to make such a bold claim and then immediately counter it with
I know that, but
for
like
3 of them.
But that is still a big statement.
It is.
It's not as good as Hybrid Theory. It's not as good as Minutes to Midnight, and it's not as good as the light one, the last one that they released before Chester died. It's better than every one of their other albums.
Cool.
Which is high praise.
It is.
Okay, that's all my honorable mentions. Please talk for a little while now.
Okay. First honorable mention, probably would have made the list if it wasn't an EP, was Myth and Lights. And I know that most of those are just remixes of songs that she already has, but man, are they good. They might be better than the original versions.
I hate the whole thing.
I know you do. I love it. I think especially the last track, which I think is Savage, the version of Savage that's on this album. It's 8 songs, so it's 27 minutes, so technically it's almost a full album. It really is, but it's remixes and you know all that mess. But
and it
together,
technically is an EP, I think so.
Yeah, and it's technically an EP. It's full of remixes, so it doesn't count as a new album. But that version of Savage is super dubsteppy and just really, I love it. I think it is fantastic. Honorable mention number 2 is an album called Last Call by Dan Terminus. And Dan Terminus is like, it's the kind of album where it's like if someone who primarily does video game music makes an album that has nothing to do with any game, they just make their own album.
Okay.
It's got like a synthwave and chiptune kind of blend together without. So one of the best things that chiptune artists have done in the last 10 years is figure out how to make music that's consistently listenable. Because I love like NES music as much as the next person, but if you try to like listen to a full soundtrack or a full album, it gets pretty grating. It's hard to just, you don't put chiptune songs like that in your
definitely
rotation.
could see that.
But you mix in like my number 1 or 2 album from 2015, I think it was an album by Cubby called Ember, and it is the perfect example of like, here's a bunch of chiptune stuff peppered into regular electronic music, and it's just stellar. And this is exactly that same kind of thing. So I didn't put it in the top 12 because I haven't listened to it a ton, and it seems hard to justify an instrumental album in a top 12 for me. So that's the only reason that it stayed out.
Okay.
Cabin Fever by B. Mike. I sent you one of his songs. Some of the most wonderfully produced music. I heard it and I was like, this sounds incredible. And it's hip hop, which I have excessively low exposure to.
Right. That was your kind of rap hip hop stuff you were sending me.
Yeah, and I've
That's right.
been trying to get more into it. It's been really tough for me. Historically, not a hip hop guy, but the way that album sounds is like, this just sounds amazing.
Okay.
So it definitely gets honorable mention, even though I don't like it enough as an album totally to be on the list. Now, there's an album called Turn the Light On by a band called Imminence. And Imminence is a perfect example of why have I never heard of this band? This is an album from last year, but if it came out this year, it would easily be probably one of the top three.
Okay.
One of the top three on the list. This album is so good. It's heady, moody kind of emo stuff. I know I've been saying that about all these emo albums this time, and they do kind of have that in common, but man, there's something so dark and sad about the way that all the music is written, and it is long and intricate. Like, you listen to it and it almost has, I don't even know what to compare it to, where it's just, you listen to it and it's like every one of these songs has so much to it. It's got like, not even tangibly, but just emotionally, there's so much even going on.
Is it heavy?
It is heavy.
Okay.
And it is really, really very good. And then my last honorable mention is just the band Makeup and Vanity Set. They do synthwave. It's instrumental. And they are on my list because they put out 5 albums this year. And I've listened to them all, and they're all good, and they're all different. They're all a little on the short side, but I mean, it's at least 8 songs per album, which is like, that's enough. If you're putting out 5 albums, you can do 8 songs an album. And
that's too much. That's oversaturation.
It is. It's just like,
Yeah.
but every one of these is so, and they're all long. They don't even list it as EPs. They're just full albums, and they are fantastic for getting stuff done. It's absolutely music to work to.
Okay. Like it.
Yeah. The honorable mention's done.
Okay. All right. Now we'll move on to our top 4, I believe, right?
Top 4. Number 4. Pamphlicest by Protest the Hero.
Very interesting, because last time we did one of these for Music Room, you talked about Protest the Hero a lot. Right? That was
In a good way?
No, because that was the year that they
No.
did that. We're gonna release a song every month and charge you for it or something weird.
Yeah, they had a crowd-funded album called Pacific Myth. And it's okay. It's okay.
Okay.
This album is just throw out everything that happened with Pacific Myth, and even throw out the direction that their production kept moving in, because their music had just been produced to its last drop, and everything about it was so synthetic. Like, their music is already so mathematic in the way that it's written. It's 100 billion things all at once,
Right.
in a way that feels like chaos. And so it had been mathed out. It was just all numbers by the time they got to Pacific Myth. And this is a super live sounding album. It's very much, they sound like a band again. And their album called Scurrilous, I think it's 2010, I'm not sure what year, is a perfect album. It is the perfect Protest the Hero album. Their album after that, Volition, is almost as good. Really, it has a little bit more variance in terms of like this song here, way up here, this one maybe a little bit less, where Scurrilous is just flat across the board, 10 perfect songs of all equal quality. And then Pacific Myth was not something I enjoyed, and now this is an excellent album. The song that I chose to be the one to show off in case we were doing that sort of thing, it's the last song on the album. It's called Rivet, and it is a cover of Brother Can You Spare a Dime. And it's like, if you think about that song, like a Bing Crosby's 1930 Brother Can You Spare a Dime, which is, I think, even from like the teens originally. and like put it in a Protest the Hero package. Like they take the way, like the chorus of how that song starts, and then they kind of go off and make their own song with it. But they didn't sample it because they made their own version, but it's in there, and it's just what an interesting. It's so much fun. It's the most fun to listen to that, and fantastic album. I'm glad that they're back. I was really looking forward to this because the last one was such a bummer.
So are they back on track to do more albums then? Because they only released 3 albums in the last decade, right?
I would imagine so. I don't really know what their world looks like, honestly. But,
right. Well, that's good.
But I'm glad they're back making real music. And I mean, Pacific Myth is fine. It is. It's not like it was. It wasn't boring.
It can't be easy to release a song every month, though. Like that just...
Yeah.
Or was it every month or was it every week?
I don't remember what it was.
It was a weird thing they were trying to do, and I...
Yeah, and I appreciate the experimentation. There's plenty in it, but there's a very fine balance in this type of music between being all numbers and crazy time signatures and being really good, and being all of that and being just a dry husk that doesn't mean anything to you. And it went on the wrong side of that line with Pacific Myth, and this is the Protest that's always been ever since Kezia and Fortress and Scurrilous. Like, this is another ridiculous name. It's Kezia, Scurrilous, Pamphlicest. Like, what are these words?
Pamphlicest.
Yeah.
That's just weird.
Palimpsest.
Palimpsest?
P-A-L-I-M. Palimpsest. Yeah, which is, who knows what the hell that means. But I'm sure plenty of people. But yeah, fantastic album. Can't recommend it enough.
Okay. All right, on to my number 4. This is one that I think you've heard, but if not, you're going to be bummed that you missed out on. This is Angel Miners and the Lightning Riders by AWOL Nation, who finally, damn it, released a good album.
Oh, maybe I should listen to this then, because we agree on that.
Yes, because they have released 2 albums now that were just meh.
Yeah.
And they weren't that bad, really. It's just his choice of how those 2 albums sounded was so weird. And I'm talking about, I think one of them was called Run. One of them's called Run. And then their most recent one, other than this one, was Here Come the Runts.
How do you feel about Monolith? Is that their first album as AWOL Nation with...
No, I think that's their first. Their first album was just self-titled, and I think that's the one you're talking about. I don't think Monolith is any of them, but I think they only have 4 albums. They have 4 albums, and the first one is their self-titled one, and that is the one that you and I both liked.
Megalithic Symphony.
Oh yes, Megalithic Symphony.
That's what I was thinking
of.
Yes.
I love that album. We talked about that album ad nauseum before. It felt like a continuation of Under the Influence of Giants.
Well, that's interesting because I don't like that album. I haven't liked anything by AWOL Nation because of how much I want them to sound like Under the Influence
I remember
of
that.
Giants.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Well, there are certainly elements from Under the Influence of Giants that they brought to Aaron Bruno has brought to each of his albums for sure. And I love Megalithic Symphony. I have a version of, I have a copy of their original album of that, and then 2 copies of their deluxe edition that come with a bonus disc with all sorts of cool side stuff on it. But then their album after that, which is called Run, which is where the GIF Run comes from.
Oh, that's from that?
Famous,
I didn't know that. That's
Vine
great.
thing. Yeah. That album was so weird because whereas Megalithic Symphony was like a cool, weird, like every song had like completely different sounding drums, weird, like lo-fi sounding guitars and things, and then his poppy, kind of happy, really great infectious melodies over the top of it. And then at the end, of course, they had the shirt that I was going to wear that I have over there, the Nights of Shame song, the 10-minute epic song that he had that you and I both love from Megalithic Symphony. It's great. Then his second album, Run, for some reason, all the guitars on it were like low passed. Like all frequencies on the guitars were cut off at like 500 hertz. So it just sounded like this sound.
I see, sure.
And it was weird because that album is basically a pop metal album. Like all the guitar riffs and synth riffs and synth bass and stuff, they're all just like heavy drops and stuff, which is really weird. Kind of came out of nowhere. But the album was just mixed weird, like super weird. And so then on his next album, Here Come the Runts, he added a little bit more high end to the guitars, but he added like a little dirty grittiness to it so that the drums and everything felt a little bit more sort of like roomy. Everything felt more like a band kind of playing together, and the songs weren't as well written, which is weird because that's the thing he's good with. He's like writes good songs, good melodies. And that album was just disappointing because it was like he was kind of moving in the direction I wanted him to go. And now we get to the culmination of AWOL Nation with Angel Miners and Lightning Riders. Only 10 songs, 10 full songs. They're not all very long, but 10 full songs. Every single one is good. Every song has good drums. Every song has fantastic guitar. The last track, the thing I love about Aaron Bruno is that he doesn't give a crap what anyone wants him to do. He's going to make the songs that he wants to make no matter what anybody says or what they want from him. And on every one of his albums, the last track is always this like long, slow thing. It was the same thing with Under the Influence of Giants. Remember, they had sort of like a normal song, and then it ended, and there was this sweet, thick bass riff that came in with this like doo-doo-doo, doo-doo, doo-doo-doo.
I just listened to that album yesterday, actually.
Yeah, it was such a cool like bass line and such a cool thing, and it just kind of kept going. And he likes to add vocal layers on top of things, so he'll just like sing something and then loop it, and sing something else and loop it, and have it build into this giant thing. The last song on this album is a metal song with him screaming his ass off during parts, and it's awesome. It's totally cool. Throughout the whole album, there are like these sweet, like little metal guitar riffs just like sprinkled in. There's spaghetti western sounds on here, which is great. There's fast, like one of the things that I didn't care about his last two albums were that there was too much reverb for my taste. You know, I don't like reverb drenched stuff very much. There was too much reverb. He pulled back on that. Everything feels more close and intimate on this album. The drums feel great in every song. There's a song that features Rivers Cuomo on it. That's a great song. A lot of the songs are about California, which I'm not a big fan of songs that are about the coasts. It's like kind of get over yourself and stop writing music about yourself. But I guess I understand it. But like, it's just a good album. It is. I wrote down in my notes that like it is for fans of Under the Influence of Giants. Like, the songs are so well written. They all sound like they could be performed live without having a ton of tracks play behind them, which is not something I'm generally against. But like every song is catchy. There's a song on here for every one of his past singles. There's a song on here that's sort of reminiscent of that, but better. And so there's a lot of heavy stuff. Like I said, I can't stress that enough. Like, this is a pop album by like one of the most popular pop rock groups in all of the world.
Yeah, they're huge.
And they secretly put metal on this.
Good.
And when I say metal, I mean like metal. Like, I'm not just talking like Godsmack. I'm talking metal.
I'll listen to that. I will.
You will, and you're gonna be bummed that you didn't put it on your list, I think, because it's that good. The only negative that I could see at all is that it's only 10 songs and it is a little bit short.
Yeah.
But it still is totally worth. I do not regret purchasing the CD at all. It's so good. That's my number 4.
Fantastic. Number 3. Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas put out an album called Hyper Toughness. And it's all in capital letters and it's all very Japanese.
Oh, I was going to say Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. That's that Japanese band you enjoy.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they can do no wrong. They refuse to put out bad music. Absolutely refuse. And it's just,
Gotta love bands
it's just
like that.
them. It's just them front to back. It's I don't even know what else to say. It's, what was their last album? Damn it. I had it.
You've talked to me about this band before, but I don't recall listening to like a single second of their music.
We did, because you remember thinking that it was a little bit too frantic, like just kind of, because it's constantly changing. It's always like, and then there's another type of song, and it's
That's
just,
right.
but it's this fantastic combination of metal and electronic, and sometimes they go together, and sometimes they break apart, and then you get all metal or all electronic and dubstep, and then it jumps right over here, and the heavy on the auto tune, and it's super Japanese, and it's magnificent. Yeah,
Okay.
New Sunrise last time, their album 2017, and then Phase 2, and all that we have now, like all of their albums, every album cover looks like clown barf. Like it's just as to quote girlfriend reviews, it's just diarrhea Christmas lights. Like it's just colors with things that you can barely even understand, and all of their music matches that so well. It's so much fun. It's like I discovered them because I was trying to tell someone about Boom Boom Satellites, and I was describing them to her, and she was like, "You mean like this?" And then she gave me the Fear and Loathing, and I was like, "Oh yeah, yep." And then I didn't even bother sending her Boom Boom Satellites because it became so tame immediately as
Right,
a
right.
comparison. I was like, yeah, yep, that's exactly what I mean. Yeah.
For
no, I
sure.
never mentioned any other band. That's exactly right. And it's the most fun to like play it for people and have them and watch their brains change shape in real time as they try to figure out what to do with what they're hearing and how on earth they could possibly like it as much as they do.
Love it.
That's what they do. It's the best. I love it.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out because I remember enjoying parts of it, but I remember being disappointed that it was so disparate.
It is. It's very disparate.
Because if you asked like the average like music listener like what is Japanese music, they would say it's crazy, chaotic, anything.
Would they? I don't even know what to call it, what to say.
I definitely feel like that's kind of stereotypically like Japanese. Maybe that's just Japanese heavy music.
Yeah.
Or, I don't. Maybe that's just basing it off of all the stuff I listen to, with the exception of a few bands. But yeah, I feel like that's. I don't know.
Isn't that what Mook and Maximum sound like?
No, that's what's special about those two bands is that they managed to make things feel not disparate. Like it feels like maybe from song to song it can feel disparate, but within each song it's a lot more. I was more thinking like I feel like the average person's most relate Japanese music to like anime intros and stuff.
That's a good point, and this is
those
exactly that.
And those are all like meant to be like a lot of them are real songs that are cut down or just a portion of it, but a lot of them are also just like manufactured to sound like you assume a Japanese anime intro should sound like because they all sound exactly the same in certain ways. So it is kind of interesting, and that's how I think a lot of people think of Japanese music. But
damn it, this conversation just reminded me of a Japanese band that I like called Survive Said the Prophet, and they have an album from this year that I forgot about.
Oh, hey, you can't get into that now. That's too much.
I know.
I found 2 albums yesterday that I was like, hey, these are really great. Nope. Get away.
I know. I've listened to this album several times. It would definitely go on my list above like the bottom half. And I totally forgot.
Get behind me, Satan. We ain't got no time for you. Okay, so my number 3 is one that I couldn't deny. It is Arcadia by Smash Into Pieces, which I sent to you and you were like, I don't know.
Okay.
This is the album that I was talking about earlier when you were talking about Amaranth. This is the same exact thing. This is
sure.
like if you took the melody and the lyrics and you plucked them out of this song and you gave it to Britney Spears and she sang it, you'd be like, yeah, this is a good Britney Spears song. You know, if you give it to NSYNC, they'd be like, yeah. Instead, this is heavy electronic music with guitars and a singer who you figured out who I was trying to get it, who I thought it sounded like, the guy from Rise Against.
Okay. Yeah. I remember that.
I was like, who does this sound like? And you're like, I don't know. And I'm like, it's like I think of like a song like Rooftops, like some kind of, and you're like, Rise Against. And I'm like, yes, this guy sounds just like that if he were in sync doing heavy electronic music. That's exactly what this sounds like. It's so disgustingly manufactured pop that it makes me feel dirty when I listen to it, but I want to sing every word because it's so good. Like this, it's very reminiscent of something Clayton would do in terms of what it sounds like.
Okay.
It sounds like Scandroid.
I don't remember the music well enough.
Scandroid and Cell Dweller. Yeah, kind of put together. To be honest, I don't even know if you listened to it or not. I was just like, it reminds me of some guy with rooftops and something, and you're like, Rise Against? And I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
I don't understand how he gets
But anyway, his voice is so cool, And it has elements of being heavy, but he can also like sing like super, super well. And when I say sing, I mean like seriously, like Justin Timberlake. Like there are moments where I'm listening to this and I'm like, this could literally legit be an NSYNC song. Like that's how pop it is. But then it's a heavy beat. Every song has a heavy beat. Every song is produced to within an inch of its life, like you were saying earlier. Like it sounds like some people sat in a room and they were like, what makes music popular? This and this and this and this. Mm-hmm. Put them together.
Sandwich, yeah.
Make it like this. And I have done no research on this band. I think they're from Europe somewhere, a Scandinavian country, I think. I don't know how enormous they are, but as far as I'm concerned, they should be like, I mean, they should be huge. I know that I've read in reviews of this album, the few things that I've seen, people say that they like their earlier heavy work. So I went and looked, and I think they have 2 or 3 other albums. And I think that I haven't listened to them yet because, as I said, I've just been focusing on music from 2020 for like basically this whole year.
Yeah.
And so I'm like so excited to go back and listen to this band's other music, that I have not heard yet. It's just really, it makes me sort of fight with myself internally because it's so pop. It's just so pop. Like when I mentioned earlier with Amaranth making like the soundtrack to like video game commercials and trailers and stuff, that is this every song 100%. Like there's one song that's about being a mercenary and you only got one bullet in the chamber. Go ahead and get your game, boy. Go do what you can do, yeah. You got one bullet in the chamber. Like, it's so stupid. But it's like the height. It's like the best that could ever be. But then it's all wrapped in this, like, the drums are all big and heavy, like a Clayton drum would be, like a Cell Dweller thing. Mm-hmm. It's all floor-to-the-floor dancey stuff. Like, you could dance at the club to all this stuff. But then there's, like, these kind of cool heavy guitars, and they're sidechain compressed with the kick. So it's all going, like, rum, rum, rum. And some of it's heavy. There's like a shredding guitar solo in one of the songs. The acoustic guitar is great on the few songs that feature it. There's some trip-hoppy feeling stuff. Like, it's just a great album. Like, it's honestly, like, I do not feel bad having it be my number 3, even though it makes me feel a little dirty inside. But, like, it's just a good album. And if you like Amaranth, 100,000%
I'll try it again because I don't remember this. I remember the conversation, but
my number 1 most listened to song this year, according to Spotify, was the first song on this album.
Is Arcadia the band or the album?
Arcadia is the name of the album. The band is called Smash Into Pieces.
Okay.
And I don't know if you see the artwork. There's like a helmet, like a lit up helmet thing. And that. I don't know if the guy performs that way or something, but like every one of their albums has that. It's like it looks kind of like a stormtrooper with like lights on his helmet. And that's like on every one of their albums. So I don't know if it's a character they created or what, but the best pop thing you could do.
Good.
So,
all right. Do you want to guess what my number 2 is?
The only thing that I could guess would be Poppy.
Good guess.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It is. I Disagree by Poppy. And this is what I was talking
Wait, is it
earlier.
I Disagree or I Disagree More?
Is More the deluxe version?
Yes, it's a more recent version of the album that she released with 3 bonus songs on it.
I saw that. I haven't actually listened to it. So we're going to go with I Disagree, not More.
No, do I Disagree More. It's the same album plus 3 other great songs.
Fine. I Disagree More by Poppy. Mm-hmm. Did you know she put out a Christmas EP?
I did, yes.
Have you listened to it?
It's just silly. It's just...
Yeah, it's
not very good.
It's not very good, yeah. It's just songs. But, yeah, and earlier when I was talking about an album that I thought, this will be the album of the year next year. Mm-hmm. It's almost made it.
That was the Poppy one, huh?
That's the Poppy one, because you told me Poppy's coming out with a metal album because she was starting to lean that way with the EPs that she put out towards the end of last year with like Meat and those other ones.
Concrete.
Scream. Yep. Well, Concrete, I didn't even hear until this album was announced.
Right.
And that was the single.
Yeah, that might be what I'm thinking. Yeah.
But yeah, the EPs that she was putting out were starting to get heavier. And I was like, this thing that she's doing, if she keeps doing this thing, it's going to be really, really exciting. And she did. And it's so good. And I saw her live sometime recently. I had to be this year, but it must have been like January, February for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
And it was so good, dude. She killed. She was like, in my mind, it's like, how good do I think Poppy's going to be live? Because you sort of get this idea that she's sort of a persona. She's a
Right.
manufactured, she's a YouTuber who also decided to sing some songs, and who knows
Yep.
what kind of quality we're going to expect. It was so good. It was so good. And I love it. I love it to pieces. It's got the same disparate kind of thing that Fear and Loathing does without the frantic, like, turned up to 11 vibe, but like Concrete especially is a perfect example of like, here's
Right.
some Cardigan style, like, summertime meadow pop, and then here's metal, and they just go bang into each other and then blast their heads like goats.
Yep.
And it's the perfect blend of both types.
Yeah.
And being able to produce a song that goes those two wildly different directions seems excessively difficult.
And to do it with almost no metal, like it came out of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like
Absolutely.
it didn't because of what you were saying that she was leaning that way, but like it's almost like it's like if you could, like, Poppy is such a cool, like you were saying, she's a character, and like if you could pick something, if you could be like, Poppy, your character is really cool, you have this sort of cool dark aesthetic to you, like, I wish you would make a metal album, but
Yeah.
that'd never
If
happen.
we think of it in terms of color, like, let's say Poppy was pink. And towards the end of last year, she starts to get like a darker, maybe once she'll have like a purple scarf, and then January, black.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
just that hard switch where it's like
Yes.
you sort of get this idea that something's coming, and it just goes straight black.
And the way that she just leaned into it so hard, like I told you throughout the year several times, Poppy, she's a huge WWE fan, and so several
Really? I
times,
didn't know that.
Yes, several times. Maybe you must not have watched any of those videos I sent you then.
Probably not. Or I forgot.
Several times throughout the year, when they were having a special pay-per-view, Poppy came and performed one of the wrestlers' theme songs when she was coming out. So like, what she actually ended up doing was she ended up performing "Concrete," I think is the song. She ended up performing "Concrete" live there with her band as this Japanese lady who's the Io Shirai, who's the NXT champion, women's champion, came out to the ring. And so Poppy would be standing there, and the girl would come around her, and then she like go in the ring, and Poppy's like strutting around in the ring and stuff. I was like, this is like the coolest thing ever to have Poppy, who I love before she did any of this because
Yeah.
she's cool.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden become metal, and then become like a WWE thing, and she did
I'm
it multiple
surprised
times.
this isn't on your list.
I thought about it a lot, but the disparate parts make it, and it was tougher because when she released I Disagree More, because the original album I think is only 10 tracks, and one of them is like an intro thing, so like one of them's not a full song, I think.
I don't think so. I think they're all songs.
Well, anyway, a 13-track album is much harder to ignore than a 10-track album.
Very true.
And I loved all of it, and I have my favorite songs off that album, and I did listen to it multiple times throughout the year, but it wasn't that impressive to me. I mean,
Yeah.
it is, and I told you before, I think what she is doing for metal music I could not overstate it. Like, the amount of little girls and kids who were into her, who are now
Yes.
going to be into, because when we say metal, if you haven't heard this, it is real.
It is
heavy,
pure. Like,
metal.
even my favorite song from this album, Bite Your Teeth, is just has this big doom interlude where and then
Yes.
it's like this really slow clugging with just dissonant screaming of like murder. Like, it is the most sludgy doom metal. There is absolutely no caveats or qualifiers for what
Yep.
kind of metal this is. It's
And
just pure.
The fact that she did that, I don't think should be discredited. Like, it's such a special and important thing, and this is
Yes.
this is probably a lot of people's first metal album.
I believe
And
it.
it got I imagine it got thousands, and that's maybe a low, like possibly like hundreds of thousands of people into metal for the first time, and to start with this balls to the wall real metal.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so important, and I'm so glad this album made it on your list, because
Good.
I do think it's a special album, though it's not on my list.
It is a special album. Number 2. for
Okay,
you.
my number 2. You talked about metal. Now we're going to talk about brutal. Punch you in the face over and over and over and over again. We are talking about the best metal album I have heard from a new band that I discovered in a long time. I mean, this is like in at least a decade, I have not been this excited about a new metal band.
Hell yeah.
And I'm talking about Nia by Orbit Culture. This
Oh
is
yes, the Orbit Culture album.
one of
So
the most brutal albums I have ever heard. But it's not just brutality. It's melodic. It's Swedish melodic death metal at the finest that has ever been.
It is good.
Discrediting the people who created that genre, like Soilwork and In Flames and stuff. but this is heavier than In Flames or Soilwork ever dreamed about being. It's so brutal. I can't get that over. Like, I love it. The kick, the kick and guitar riffage on this album is just
rippage. Good
Right,
stuff.
it's just crazy. And so the only downside to this album is that it's the clean vocals I feel like aren't my favorite clean vocals of all time. It's very much in the when he's doing the clean like chorus vocals, it's very reminiscent of James Hetfield from Metallica.
Yeah.
And I don't particularly care for that style of, like I don't care for that. It's way better than going whoa, like which get that out of here with that. But like it is what it needs to be because the intensity of the music really never dies down, but the vocals bring it down and make it the chorus is a little bit more singy and stuff. And he has singy background vocals too. But like there's really there are solo moments on this album, which a lot of the metal I like nowadays, now that I feel like I'm getting a little bit older and more mature in my liking of metal, I really appreciate a good metal solo. I appreciate more intricate metal. This isn't that. It's just the 10 most brutal breakdown like riffs I've ever heard in my life are on this album, all 10. Like, it's insane the amount of incredible riffs that are on this album, and the vocals are just blood curdling low guttural growls that are the most heavy perfect thing ever. I would compare it maybe to Scar Symmetry and Christian Alveston, who's one of my favorite metal vocalists of all time, but without the singing aspect and the more melodic keyboardy work of that.
Yeah.
The production on the album I have to shout out because there are some like pads and like string pads, synth pads. There's not a lot of like, there's certainly no like blippity bloopity stuff anywhere on this album to be found. And it's very, the stuff that's in there is very much an addition to the song rather than a focal point. There are a few songs that start out with this cool, like percussive, like, it's almost like something you would hear in like a movie trailer, like a bunch of people at once hitting like a drum or a stick against like a rim shot or something.
Yeah.
It's this like a train track sounding thing almost, and it'll go and build up, and then everything will come in and just crush you. There's a few moments on the album where that effect happens, and it's really cool, and I don't know how they recorded that. And I love when I can't figure out how something was recorded. And then there's a few moments on the album where it gets really big, and there's these big like thick pads underneath when they're playing, and it's frantic, and the whole thing just feels like it's gonna get so big that your speakers can't contain it anymore. And I love those blooming moments. And then the last two songs fit together really well and make into this, like, it's almost like a single piece of music, and they connect really nicely, and that's nice. And then on the CD version, there's a bonus 11th song on here that's not available online that I could find anywhere. Maybe it is on YouTube Music, but
nice.
it's not on Spotify. And there's a song on here called Warg Blood, which is just the most badass thing. Warg Blood, like a warg, like from Lord of the Rings. Warg Blood. It's amazing. But anyway, I can't hold it close enough for you to read it. But anyway, Nia by Orbit Culture, they're my new, like, the most exciting metal band that's going right now, I feel. Just totally blew me away. I had no expectations from it. Never heard of them before. This is their second full-length album, I think. And, like, dude, amazing. Front to back. But only for fans of, like, real heavy, hardcore, brutal metal.
It's actually that video or that band. I watched a couple of reaction videos on YouTube for that.
Yep.
Because it's so huge and savage and fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Number one.
Before we get to our number ones,
Okay.
I have my video game moment that I wanted to just mention.
Oh, sure.
Did you come up with sort of like an equivalent thing to that? Or?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
The Final Fantasy VII Remake landed this year.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, 8 discs of music. And I mean, the original game was a 3-disc game. And this is, takes the first 20 hours of disc 1 and turns it into a 100-hour game. And so it's going to be like a 3 or a 4-part series of games where each one is its own whole release, which is insane. It's something that no one has ever done in gaming before.
Is that your favorite game of the year?
Yes, it is.
Really?
Favorite game of the year, favorite game of all time.
Okay. That's good.
It is, and it's just, and they did so many things that did not need to be done. Like they're doing something with remaking this game in the way that they have is something that nobody's done. And so they could have set the bar a lot lower and it would have been awesome. We were like, great, it looks good, great, hooray. Like, but there's so many different parts of the game that are just like, this sequence has to be a year of work and we didn't need this. Nobody asked for this and it's perfect. But yeah, in terms of gaming, and music, 3 different composers. Uematsu himself has a big part of it. So many definitive versions of classic songs in full orchestration, 8 discs, 7 of just regularly orchestrated new versions of all the old songs. And then the 8th disc there's a jukebox in the game of 40 songs that you collect, and they're all different versions of all of these they're just little jukebox versions. Some of them are jazzy, some of them are marimba style stuff. And that incorporates disc 8, and it's 4 or 5 hours of music, and it's beautiful. What a perfect thing.
That's awesome. So I wrote this in the doc because it's kind of a story it's something that came out this year. Well, it doesn't matter, but it's just a moment I wanted to mention because I don't have anywhere else to mention it. It makes sense putting it here. Mm-hmm. So my favorite game of the year it's close because I am loving Assassin's Creed Valhalla, and I'm only probably an eighth of the way into the game.
Huge game.
Yeah, it's going to be huge, 100%. And I have not scratched the surface of it really yet, but I'm loving it. I loved Ghost of Tsushima. You played that one too. Loved Ghost of Tsushima. Loved everything about it. The way that game brought surprises and changed itself at the end of the game, but still giving you enough time to enjoy the changes. Super gratifying.
Good. I haven't finished it yet, so no spoilers.
No, I beat the game and platinumed it as I beat the game. Totally amazing. And like I said, the way they kept bringing new things out of that game all the way through is amazing. But my favorite game of the year has to be Last of Us Part 2.
Good.
I can't.
Good.
I mean, it was.
So many people are mad about that game, and they're all wrong.
Yes, they are. They're mad because they didn't get it. And I don't blame someone for not getting it because it's not for everybody, and I 100% agree. I get that. Mm-hmm. But if you didn't like it, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, I have to tell you that you didn't understand it. Mm-hmm. Because if you understand it, then you can't not like it because of what it is.
So good.
But I had a moment.
I will say about it, I'm right at the end, I haven't finished it. And 2, I will say pacing wise, it did have a section in the last third that seemed to drag a little bit longer than it needed to in the exact same way that Uncharted 4 had that problem. But that's all.
Okay. Yeah, I found
Otherwise, it's great.
To me, the pacing of that game was one of the things that made it amazing because it lasted twice as long as I thought it was going to.
Very true.
And I'll just leave it at that. But and actually, gosh, man, Last of Us is so great.
That one of my favorite experiences that I've ever had in my life is going through that game, living in Seattle and wandering around and seeing all of these places that are real, and the buses are the right color and the right shape, and you go inside the Link station and the fonts are all the same, and the murals, the aquarium inside the buses, the seat covers are the right color.
That's awesome.
Just walking around and having it all be so well crafted is this is cool. This is so cool.
Yeah. And then I feel the game's just as amazing as you do, and I never got to experience any of that. So that's great. Yeah. But anyway, I had a moment in that game that will stay with me for literally forever because of something that happened in the game, but also more importantly, factors outside of the game. So in order to explain this, and I'm not going to take forever, I promise, but my nephew is 9 years old and he lives 2.5 hours away from me. So I only get to see him like maybe once a month, maybe every 4 weeks or so, if that, during the normal year. But over the summer, he came and stayed with us for a couple weeks, for 2 weeks over summer break. Which, I mean, the whole year was messed up because of coronavirus and whatnot. But
Yeah.
But anyway, like it was a really sucky year because his birthday's in March, which was right when coronavirus hit real hard, and we had this big party planned for his birthday, and we weren't able to have it until like June or July when he came and spent time with us. And so anyway, one of his favorite games is Just Cause 4, and one of the he loves the Just Cause series in general. We played a lot of Just Cause 3 together. He just loves creating chaos in the game and stuff. He's turning 10 this year, so he's like 9 and 8 months old at this point. But we were playing Just Cause 4, and one of his favorite things to do in that game, because he loves repetition still, he loves to go to, one of my favorite Easter eggs in any game ever is in Just Cause 4. And he was here, and he had to go this day. His mom and him were going to go back, and I wasn't going to get to see him for probably like a month, 2 months. Who knew with the coronavirus when I was going to get to see him again? And so, of course, it's always sad the day he has to go. So we try to do as much fun stuff as we can while we're together for our last couple hours together. And so everyone was upstairs taking a nap, and I came downstairs here with him, and he was like, I was like, what should we play? Normally we play like Rocket League or build in Minecraft or Portal Knights or something. And he was like, let's play Just Cause 4, because we haven't done that for a while. So we loaded up Just Cause 4, and we went into this city, and we were just kind of messing around, like, flicking people up in the air, throwing buildings and stuff all around the place.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, this is the town that has that Easter egg in it. Let's go do that. And so we go to this building. It's a construction site, this big, tall, high-rise building that's being built. And if you go up 3 floors, you start to hear some music. And you go up another floor, and the whole game changes into black and white. And you hear the song "Take on Me" by Aha, and it's the music
cool.
video.
Yes.
It's the music video for "Take on Me" from Aha playing, and there's a big screen on the other side of the wall when you walk into this room, and it's normal on the other side of the screen, so it's like the reverse of the music video. And there's a lady dancing over there, and so for like 2 hours we messed around, like taking the lady and flicking her around the room and jumping out and crashing a helicopter into the room to see if it would go white and stuff. And we did that for like 2 hours. And I just heard the song over and over and over and over and over and over. And he would go downstairs and go back up. And every time you do it, it starts again. So it's that.
Yep.
Right. And so then he left. And we're all sad, like we always are when they leave. We wave at them, run along the car as they drive off into the distance, right? So later that night, I come downstairs. And I'm like, I'm going to play Last of Us for the first time in almost 2 weeks, because I wasn't able to play it while he was there. And I load it up, and Ellie and Dina walk into a music shop, and they walk onto the top floor, and Ellie sits down, and she picks up a guitar, and she plays the most beautiful version that's ever been written ever of that song. And I was just like, are you freaking kidding me that this is happening?
I love it.
The most amazing moment I've ever had playing a video game. Well, maybe not, because there's a lot of crazy things in video games.
Yeah.
But like, contextually, like you could not write that in a sitcom or a movie. Like, it would not mean as much as it did to me to hear that. And I just sat there, and she just played, and I sat there, and she played, and then I just sat there and sat there and sat there. I was like, this can't be real. Like, this can't be a coincidence. Like, it's so crazy that this happened. And I can't enough. Like, that game is so amazing in so many reasons. But to me, when I think of The Last of Us, that is what I will think of forever.
Good.
Is the sweet guitar mechanics in that game, how you can play any
Very
song you want
cool.
to. It's amazing. And just that particular moment of her and Ellie and Dina sitting there playing Take On Me, and just how amazing that moment
That's
was.
fantastic. That's really great.
100%. I wish I could have filmed it. I wish I could have
how could-
everyone
have ever known.
experienced that. But you just can't. That's something you can't share with people, really. All right. What is your number 1 album of 2020?
Womb by Purity Ring.
Okay. All right. I didn't listen to it at all. I think you sent me a link to it at some point, and
I might have, and I may have berated you endlessly and told
Yeah.
you how it is so good. And
I didn't.
when I found out that they were putting out an album this year, because it took them forever to decide to do that, and then the announcement came like 2 weeks before the album came out, which is the best way to do it, because then I don't have to sit and wring my hands for 6
Right.
months and wait. I thought Poppy's going to be number one. And then I saw that they were going to put out an album, and I thought, oh, never mind. If they do it as good as their last album, it will be the best album of the year.
That's
And it's
high.
just as good.
That's like high expectations.
Yeah, and I
And they
can't believe they
lived
did
up.
it. They nailed
Wow.
it. It's another perfect album. It's just as good, if not better, than the one that they put out in 2015. So it's been 5 years, and it is perfect. It's just perfect. There's nothing else for it. And this is the witch house electronic genre. And you'll probably hate it because it's very dreamy. It's very ethereal and reverby and dripping with all kinds of effects. There's not a clean thing in the house. But it's so dark and mysterious and poetic, and it's perfect. It's just so good.
That's awesome.
I don't know. It's too good that I don't even have a whole lot of other stuff to
How
say.
many songs are on there?
10, I think.
Okay.
I think that's right. If it's 10, it's the same 10. Like, they were both 10. The 2015's album was also 10. Let me double check. I went and listened to the album last night as I was getting this ready, because just to pick a song, and I accidentally listened to the whole thing. Yeah, it's 10. It's 10, and the one album before that from 2015, Another Eternity, is also 10.
Okay.
And 35, and they are exactly 1 minute apart in length.
Now, 5 years is really far apart. Do they have like other projects that they're in that they released stuff
I
in?
don't think so. They're nothing. They're nobody. They're just the dude, some chick, and I'm not sure if they're brother and sister or they're married. I can't remember, but they're in Canada, and yeah, 5 years. But it sounds like 5 years worth of work. Like, it's one of those bands where you hear it and you're like, okay, I'll allow it. If it's going to be this good, take 5 years. Who cares?
I'll definitely check it out now.
You
Being
should.
your number one, that's
Number one.
high praise.
is.
Was their last album your number one that year? I don't think so. That was the Cuddy album, right?
No, it would have to be. It's so perfect. I'd have to go back, but if I didn't pick them for number one that year, I don't know what went wrong, or what
can't
went
remember.
so right. But
Right.
that
Right.
it was better. But yeah, they have 3 albums now. One of which is the other 2 perfect. Their first album is okay. It's not. I mean, you can tell what they're going for. It's not very good. But their second, and this is their third album. Keep it up. Keep it up.
Okay. On to my number one, and I mentioned it once earlier in the thing. Do you?
I have no
Probably,
idea.
there's no way. Okay, so it is Aku by Mook.
Ah, okay.
And it came out, and I found out about it, and I've been trying to purchase it for months and months and months, and I can't purchase it because, son of a gun, it's $30 at the cheapest on eBay.
Yeah.
Can't find it anywhere. $30 is too much for me to spend on one album that I can listen to for free anytime I want on Spotify. So their last album, Mook is a Japanese metal band who I fight with myself over whether or not they're my favorite metal band of all time, or they can beat Raunchy, which is my other what I consider to be my favorite metal band of all time. This is their 15th studio album, and they are so good it hurts me. Because like seriously, their last album, Miyaku Haku, was my number 12 favorite album of the decade. And now, a whole year away from making that list, I feel like I put that on there incorrectly. I do not believe it should have been the number 12 album of the decade.
Better?
No, I think it should have been taken off the list, but just
Okay.
barely. Like, I had 3 albums that I was debating with myself whether they should go on there or not. And it's funny because, well, it doesn't matter. That's Miyaku Haku. Now we're talking about Aku, which means hell, I think, in Japanese. I think I had it written down.
Have you listened to the The special edition plus 2 songs that
Hold
has a
on,
different
don't. You're ruining
mastering.
you're ruining my punchline.
Okay.
So this album came out, and I listened to it. It's 15 tracks. It is perfect from front to back. There's no intermission. Every song is amazing. There's crushing, brutal metal that is as heavy as music can be. There's stupid anime intro sounding Japanese pop as it can be. It's great. There's songs with full string section on them. There's acoustic guitar solos, classical guitar solos. One thing that permeates this album through, and I found out after the fact, is that when I did a reaction/review video for this album, and in my video, you can hear me talk about every song has just a ton of piano on it. And I was like, oh, this is really, I love it. I was like, I wonder if they added a piano guy, like a piano player to their band. Well, so after the fact, someone commented on my video and said, hey, their last album from last year, which I didn't think was a real album because it had a weird title and was weird. They said they got a piano player to tour with them. And so what they did was they took a bunch of like B-sides from earlier in their career that they had never released, rewrote the songs to feature piano, and they released a whole album of that last year. Well,
Yeah,
so
the Cawaretta Piano to Living Dead.
Cawaretta Piano Tribute to the Living Dead, yes.
Okay.
And then they released 4 versions of that dumb album on Spotify because it's that album, and then it's that album live, and then it's like that album live double and some all sorts of crap.
Yeah.
And so for this album, for Aku, they kept that. They had so much fun with that guy. They were like, let's write a regular normal new album of all new material, and we'll release that this year. So that they have a piano player in the band, and they released that album. And I listened to it, and it sounded fantastic. I think the mastering was a little funky. The guitar solos, for some reason, were like really low in the mix. They were in the middle, which is where a guitar solo should be, unless it's some sort of an affected solo thing. They were in the middle, but they were just too quiet. And I was like, this is really weird, but whatever. The album was perfect. It's my number one. And then, like 2.5 weeks ago, these Japanese superheroes re-released my number one favorite album of the year, Aku plus 2. It's the same album, plus 2 additional songs, remastered by the guys in the band to make it sound better. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You're telling me that my number one favorite album of the year was re-released, sounding better, with 2 additional songs?
That I'm sure are both excellent.
Yes, they are. One of them is one of only 2 songs on the album that features a full orchestra. It's a ballad song. It's amazing. There's a piano solo and an acoustic guitar solo. The other song is a straight up funk song. Straight up funk metal song. Give it to me all day. And the funny thing is, when I did my review of the album, I said, this is great, but every one of Mook's albums has like 1 or 2 just like crazy out of nowhere like jazz songs with like brass and all sorts of stuff and piano, and it just sounds different from every other song on the album. Every Mook album has 1 or 2 of those songs. This album didn't have that. And so I said, and I agree, it's the most consistent Mook album they've ever released. It's so long. It's over an hour long. The regular version I'm talking about. It's over an hour long. Every song is a full-length song. Some of them are 5+ minutes long. They all take their time to breathe. They're all catchy. They all have great vocals. They all are mixed really well, with the exception of, like I said, the mastering was a little weird. So then when they released Aku plus 2, both songs are sort of different, and they're both great, but they both were recorded at the same session, so they sound sonically identical. And they're just different songs. And then they remastered it. Now, this is something I was really looking forward to talking to you about, because this is a very unique opportunity to listen to the same album from the same year, mastered differently by 2 different people.
It is, yeah. That's
so
unique.
the first Aku, the regular version, I noticed it sounded a little overcompressed, like a little too much. Like at times when it was supposed to get heavy, it didn't really get heavy because the guitars were kind of pushed down by all the cymbals. And I love the kick sound a lot. Like I particularly loved the way the kick felt. It had a lot of weight to it. But like I said, the middle stuff kind of because the kick was so loud, it kind of felt at times like anything that was panned in the middle, like the guitar solo, there wasn't enough of it. It wasn't present enough. Well, so now in the remastered version, the kick is brought way down in volume, and it's compressed way less. So the Aku Plus 2, which was mastered by the guys in the band, it is much more dynamic. So like when it gets heavier, it gets heavier. The guitars pop more. The things on the sides pop more. But that means they're sacrificing a little bit of like the kick. So the kick doesn't have that punch, that guttural feel to it like it does on the original Aku version.
Interesting.
Right. And so honestly, like I honestly don't know which one I prefer. I think most people would probably prefer the second version because it's not over compressed, and a lot of people hate the over compressed sound. For me, I think metal that's over compressed kind of works sometimes because, especially if it's consistently dynamic, the songs. But the guitars pop more on the second version. The vocals are a little bit more dynamic. Like you can hear more of the breathiness of his vocals, and you can hear more of the guitar solo specifically. The guitar solos are like 3 dB louder on the Aku Plus 2. And so like, I'm not even going to debate about which is better. From now on, I'll probably just always listen to Aku Plus 2 because there's 2 extra songs on there.
Yeah.
I do like the kick drum sound a lot more on the first version because it's way more prominent, and to me, that's an important part of their music. But man, it's like a dream, you know. It's like having a dream come true, you know.
Yeah.
It's like this Aku by Mook, best album. It's their best album, which means it is better than Miyaku Haku, which means it would belong in the last decade if it belonged there. It would be above my number 12 best album of the decade for sure. This may be the best metal album I've ever heard. I listened to the entirety of it this morning.
I was going to say, I'm going to go downstairs and lift after we get done here, and I will listen to this.
The funny thing about it is, I don't know if that would be a good album to like pump yourself up to.
I've lifted with a lot of weird
No,
stuff.
I know. I'm just saying, like, one interesting thing about the album, because I didn't really even talk about the music at all. One interesting thing about the album is that musically, like, it is a bit more of a mellow album overall, even though like in the middle of mellow moments that just explodes and destroys you. There's a really interesting song in the middle that I know you're gonna love, that you're gonna think your speakers are broken when you're listening to it, not because it's so loud and intense, but because there's this weird effect on it that makes it sound like it's broken. That's how the song is meant to be, and it's weird, and there's a great guitar solo that's just the most raw thing you've ever heard in that song. And then at the end of the penultimate song on the album, the chorus just has like, it sounds like the singer just like 25 times just going, and it's the most wall of sound vocal thing I've ever heard. And it's like the vocals are great because it's like a pleading. I don't know if it's English or not. It sounds like they're saying please, like please. Sure. And it's just like this giant, enormous, just blooming vocal that just goes, and then the guitars and everything are just driving, and then he sings the lead over the top of it, and oh my gosh, it's amazing. Oh, it's so good. Oh,
I really can't wait to hear this. I'm really looking forward to listening to this.
The whole album is so good, Chris. And just like the Japanese stuff you were talking about earlier, being like chaotic and stuff, Mook can be like that from song to song, but they are not like that much on this album. Within each song?
Oh, okay.
They're not like that on this album. Like you can hear anything on any song. However, there's only like one moment where you're listening and you're like, oh, this is a nice mellow part, and then it just comes in out of nowhere and shocks you. Every other song, the moment it starts, and if you watch my review, you can tell, like, the moment every song starts, I'm like, this is this type of Mook song. And they don't surprise me. It never surprised me.
Okay.
And I was disappointed at the time because I was missing those 1 or 2 crazy songs. Well, then they just added it because I asked for it, I guess.
Yeah, you asked the sky and it became.
They just added it, and so it's like, oh my gosh, how can you make a perfect album even more perfect? Just add more perfection.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's what it is.
Love it. Awesome.
And now we've got to stop talking.
Yes, we've been here for so long.
It's going to take my computer like 4 hours to render down this video.
Yes.
That's true.
It's kind of nice when that happens, because then you just hit render and then you can go do other stuff.
Yep.
And you're like, I'm still working because it's working.
Mm-hmm. And the good thing is it'll just automatically do all that stuff, and then I'll, who knows. But
yeah.
Chris, thank you so much for doing this with me.
My pleasure. We could probably do this every year.
I think we probably should.
I don't see why not.
Yeah. And I've been thinking about several other things maybe we could try to do spread out throughout the year, but we'll get into that stuff some other time.
Yeah.
For now, that's our list of the top 12 albums of 2020. And I'm really looking forward to 2021. We both mentioned things that are coming out next year that we're really looking forward to.
Yep. Looking forward to going to a concert again. Haven't got to do that this year.
Yes, this year we neither of us even mentioned Julian K at all, you know? And
Sure.
You liked that album, and I was really disappointed by Harmonic Disruptor. But anyway, yeah, because I had tickets, or I was gonna buy tickets to go see Birthday Massacre. I was gonna buy tickets to go to my first show in years because I hate live music, and I decided not to go to any more of it. But I was gonna go this year, so maybe next year. But anyway, we'll talk about all the good stuff from next year. Next year.
Year.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes. Happy.